Chapter 1182. Zhouwen realized that the number of zombies in Netherworld City was much fewer than the last time he came. He didn't see Chu He either. Could it be that Chu He's soul has been destroyed and there's no way for him to revive? Zhouwen knew that the zombies in Netherworld City would constantly revive and repeat their lives of torture. However, every time they died, a portion of their memories would be erased. Now that Chu He had vanished, there was a high chance that he was completely dead. There was no chance of revival. Ah! As Zhouwen was observing, he suddenly heard a tragic scream. However, this time, the scream wasn't from Li Xian, but from Lu Bushun. Zhouwen turned his head and saw that Lu Bushun wasn't in the torture chamber. He was already outside, but he was sitting there paralyzed. He held his head with both hands as his body trembled violently. He let out a terrified cry. "Old Lu, are you all right? You're already out." An officer who was on good terms with Lu Bushun immediately pounced forward and shook Lu Bushun's hand. Gradually, Lu Bushun finally recovered. His eyes focused again as he gradually regained his vitality. He stopped screaming and his body stopped trembling. However, his hands were still trembling involuntarily. "Overseer, I'll rest for 2 minutes before we continue," Lu Bushun said as he struggled to stand up. "There's no need to continue. Rest," Tianzhua said. "Overseer, I can do it. I just need to rest for a while," Lu Bushun hurriedly said. "That's all." "This is an order," Tianzhua said expressionlessly. "Yes, Overseer." Lu Bushun bowed and had no choice but to stop. In fact, Lu Bushun knew that it was really difficult for him to continue. Even if he forced himself to continue, he probably wouldn't be able to last more than a few rooms before going crazy. Looking at Li Xian, he had already exceeded more than 20 torture chambers. Although Li Xian's screams could still be heard, he had managed to hold on. Lu Bushun's situation didn't happen. Tianzhua glanced at the room Lu Bushun had come out of. It was the 134th torture chamber. It was still more than 100 points away from the 239th torture chamber, but Lu Bushun was already at his limit. The difference was just too great. And in front of him, Li Xian happened to come out of the torture chamber and was still bickering with Zhouwen. Lu Bushun's situation didn't happen. None of the 3 brothers of the Li family are simple characters. It's a pity that the eldest of the Li family died too early. Otherwise, the Li family would definitely be able to dominate a region. Tianzhua sighed. Li Xian and young Master Wen have an extremely good relationship. In the future, the Li family will likely contribute to Luoyang. "This is a good thing," Anxing said. "That depends on whether we can return alive this time." And Tianzhua also knew that there would be great danger this time. "With you and young Master Wen around, we will definitely be able to return alive," Anxing said firmly. And Tianzhua didn't say a word as he looked at Zhouwen and Li Xian. Whether they could enter the real netherworld depended on them. Li Xian entered the torture chamber again. Although he was still chatting and laughing like before, Zhouwen could sense that he was under immense pressure. Continuously enduring punishment and randomly enduring punishment were 2 different things. The damage to the mind and soul would continue to accumulate. Even if one rested for an hour in between, there was no way to expel the damage. He could only rely on his mental strength and faith to survive. Apart from that, there was no other way. Li Xian's cries were still tragic, but amidst the tragic cries, there was an additional chill that left one's heart cold. Zhouwen knew that he was truly in pain, and it was the kind that he couldn't take it anymore. There are still 23 torture chambers left. There are still 3 more times that the torture chambers can be opened today. Including this time, there's more than enough time. It all depends on whether Li Xian can hold on. Zhouwen counted the torture chambers behind him. "Do you want to rest for a while?" "There's still plenty of time," Zhouwen asked after some thought when he saw Li Xian come out. Li Xian shook his head. He wasn't injured, but his face was pale. However, there was a strange flush on his cheek. "Continue," Li Xian said as he walked to the next torture chamber. And Tianzhua and company had already rushed over. Their hearts were racing as they watched Li Xian suffer the torture. Even a seasoned soldier like Lu Bushun couldn't withstand the pain of punishment. He had long broken down. The fact that Li Xian could last until now had already impressed them. However, Li Xian's situation looked worse and worse. They were somewhat worried that Li Xian wouldn't be able to last until the end. When Li Xian came out again, his legs gave way and he nearly fell to the ground. Zhou was quick to react. He went forward to stop him. Li Xian wasn't injured and had strength, but his mind was already in a terrible state. "How many torture chambers are left?" Li Xian asked again. 22, Zhou answered. "Continue." Li Xian pushed Zhou hand away and walked in again. This time, the torture chamber was a burning punishment. In the torture chamber, there was a huge metal pillar that had been burned. After Li Xian entered, he was tied to the metal pillar. His hands and feet hugged the metal pillar as his face and body pressed against it. Sizzle! White smoke rose from Li Xian's body. At the same time, there was a charred smell. In an instant, Li Xian no longer looked human. Just looking at him made one's legs go limp, much less Li Xian, who was being tortured. It was hard to imagine how much pain he was in. However, Li Xian didn't scream now. Zhou ordered Punishment Ghost to speed up, but the punishment had to be firm for 10 minutes. Even if Punishment Ghost wanted to speed up, there was no way to do so. Zhou came in front of Tianzhua and pointed at Jingyu. "Lend him to me. Any conditions are fine." He wasn't good at accelerating time, so he could only seek help from others to speed up Li Xian's torture. "This is my family's matter to begin with," Tianzhua said and ordered. Tianzhua ordered, "Jingyu, cooperate with them and complete the rest of the punishment." "Yes." Jingyu quickly went forward and used time acceleration on the burning rod. However, time acceleration could only speed up time, but it couldn't shorten it. The pain Li Xian suffered didn't lessen. Amidst the time acceleration, a black carapace suddenly appeared on Li Xian's body. The black carapace quickly enveloped his body. When Zhou saw the carapace on Li Xian's body, his heart couldn't help but tighten. Li Xian's life soul and wheel of destiny were very unique. Others' life souls and wheel of destiny were separate, but his was one. It was somewhat similar to Zhou situation, but it wasn't completely the same. The carapace could be said to be his second life. Now that the carapace had appeared, it could only mean that Li Xian was indeed reaching his limit. After the carapace appeared, Li Xian's condition improved a lot. He withstood the burning rod and walked straight to the next torture chamber. His condition was much better as he passed one torture chamber after another without any hesitation. His expression couldn't be seen under the carapace, but from his trembling body, it could be seen that he was doing his best to endure the pain. He didn't even dare to speak, for fear that the moment he opened his mouth, he would lose the courage to continue. Seeing that there was only one torture chamber left, Zhou and company were extremely nervous. On the door of the last torture chamber was the word "Dream Torture." Zhou looked into the room, but he didn't see the white-robed Punishment Ghost. All he saw was a white-haired old granny sitting in the torture chamber. Chapter 1183. What kind of punishment is dream torture? Zhou frowned slightly. In the dream torture's room, other than the white-haired granny, the stone table, and the stone stool, there was nothing else. It didn't seem too dangerous, but Zhou had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. He pulled back Li Xian, who was about to step into the torture chamber. "What are you doing?" Li Xian's voice was somewhat hoarse. Zhou could sense his body trembling slightly. It was an uncontrollable spasm. It wasn't because of his body's injuries, but because of the immense psychological pressure. Although Zhou hadn't tried all the punishments previously, he knew that the mental pressure and damage he suffered were immense from what he had tried. With Zhou's tenacity, he would still feel immense pressure, and that was without him trying all the punishments. However, even if the pressure was greater, Zhou should be able to withstand it. However, his recovery speed wasn't as strong as Li Xian's. It was impossible for him to withstand all the punishments in such a short period of time. This torture chamber is the last one. I don't think it's that simple. It might be very dangerous, Zhou said. Whether it's dangerous or not, we'll know once we enter. Anyway, we have to pass this stage. Why think so much? As Li Xian spoke, he walked into the dream torture chamber. Zhou knew that Li Xian was right, but he felt uneasy when he saw the white-haired granny. There were a total of 239 torture chambers on the long street. The other 238 chambers were filled with ordinary torture ghosts. Only this room had a white-haired granny. Just this point alone was enough to tell that the torture chamber wasn't simple. However, just as Li Xian had said, even if he knew there were risks, he had to pass this stage. After Li Xian walked into the dream torture chamber, he wasn't directly placed on the torture equipment like before. He could still move freely as though he was outside. What kind of punishment is this? Do you want me to sleep here and have a dream? Li Xian said to the white-haired granny. Zhou and Xing suddenly realized that something was amiss. This was because they were the only ones who could see the torture ghosts from before. No one else could, but now Li Xian could see the white-haired granny. Can you see the white-haired granny inside? And Xing immediately asked Lu Bushun and company. We can see it. What a strange question. Shouldn't we not be able to see it? Lu Bushun asked Xing in puzzlement. The others also looked at Xing. Zhou and Xing exchanged looks, knowing that there was indeed a huge problem with the torture chamber. And Tianzhua also looked at Xing, wanting to know what he meant. Just as Xing was about to say something, the white-haired granny suddenly moved. Everyone's attention was immediately attracted to her, so Xing didn't say another word. The white-haired old lady took out a teacup and a teapot out of nowhere and placed the teacup on the stone table in front of her. Then, she picked up the teapot and slowly poured out some water to fill the teacup. The tea in the bowl was green in color, like the color of bamboo leaf. However, there was not a single tea leaf in it, let alone a bamboo leaf. A 1,000-year dream, a dream that lasts for 1,000 years. Drink this 1,000-year dream, and if you are able to make it out alive, you will be able to see the real yellow springs. The white-haired old woman spoke in a strange tone that made people uncomfortable. Do you mean that I'll sleep for 1,000 years after drinking this bowl of tea? Li Xian asked. It won't take that long. You don't have that long of a lifespan. Even if you do, you will starve to death before you can sleep, the white-haired old granny said with a smile. I'm in good health. I don't need to sleep that much. Can I wake up earlier? Li Xian asked again. No, even if a zenith heaven golden immortal descends to the mortal world, he will definitely sleep for 1,000 years after drinking this bowl of 1,000-year dream. Not a second more or less, the white-haired old granny said. There's no solution? Li Xian frowned. There's a solution. The white-haired old granny's answer exceeded everyone's expectations. How? Li Xian asked. A 1,000-year dream, a 1,000-year dream. The white-haired old granny smiled and repeated what she had just said. Li Xian, come back. Zhou expression changed as he wanted to call Li Xian out. And Tianzhua and Xing's expressions changed as well. Clearly, they understood what the white-haired old granny meant. A 1,000-year dream meant that one had to dream for 1,000 years. The white-haired old granny said that there was a solution, and it was related to the previous sentence of a 1,000-year dream. Since one could have a dream every 1,000 years, one could also spend 1,000 years in the dream while only passing a day or less in reality. It sounded like a 1,000-year dream was much simpler than a 1,000-year dream. After all, one would only spend 1,000 years in the dream. In reality, one wouldn't starve to death or be injured. It didn't seem dangerous. However, that wasn't the case. To spend 1,000 years in a dream, ignoring what kind of dream it was. Just 1,000 years was enough to make one's willpower collapse. Zhou had only been trapped on Mount Fangzhong for 100 years. He had relied on his strong willpower and focused cultivation to last 100 years. However, that didn't mean that Zhou had it easy. If he hadn't been extremely focused and had been imprisoned for 100 years, most people would have long gone mad. A 1,000-year dream. How long is this dream? Li Xian clearly understood what the white-haired old granny meant as he asked. There are 238 punishments in front. A cycle is a day. If you want it to be long, if you wish for this dream to be long, it can be long. If you want it to be short, it can also be short. It's all up to your will, the white-haired old granny said. Li Xian, come back. There's no need to continue. Sis Lan and company definitely won't be able to pass this trial. It's impossible for them to enter the real netherworld, Zhou said to the white-haired old granny with a change in expression. The white-haired old granny had already made it very clear that enduring the previous punishments in the dream was only considered a day. Then, Zhou couldn't instantly calculate how many times he had to suffer 1,000 years in the dream, nor did he want to calculate. No matter how persevering Li Xian was, he had to suffer a punishment every day for 1,000 years. Any normal person would have a mental breakdown if they spent 1,000 years like this. Let's stop here, Tianzhua said. Although there were various signs that Sis Lan and company had indeed entered Netherworld City, they couldn't be seen in Netherworld City. There was a high chance that they had entered the real Netherworld. He wanted to enter to take a look no matter what. However, such a punishment wasn't something humans could withstand. And Tianzhua wasn't willing to see Li Xian send himself to death for nothing. However, Li Xian had no intention of leaving the torture chamber. He turned his head to look at Zhou and said, Since Sis Lan and company have entered Netherworld City, there's no other possibility. They must have entered the real Netherworld. Since we're here, we have to take a look. Chapter 1184. Zhou figure flashed as he teleported into the dream torture chamber to pull Li Xian out. In the past, when he activated Great Brahma, he could do whatever he wanted. Even the torture ghosts had to listen to him, but this time, it seemed different. Zhou was repelled by a force and failed to rush into the torture chamber. A 1,000-year dream. This is a good thing to live 1,000 years longer than others. Others can't even beg for it. I've earned it, Li Xian said as he reached out to pick up the teacup. Li Xian, don't be rash. There's no need. We can think of other solutions, Zhou said as he condensed his strongest power of fear, hoping to rush in to stop Li Xian. However, for some reason, this torture chamber was completely different from the previous torture chambers. The power of fear couldn't break through at all. Old Zhou, don't be anxious. I'll be out soon. If I don't come out in time, go out and wait for me, Li Xian said as he drank the bowl of 1,000-year dream, leaving nothing behind. Good tea. Li Xian licked his lips. Just as he finished speaking, he fell to the ground and fell asleep. Release him. Great Brahma appeared behind Zhou, wanting to order the white-haired granny to release Li Xian. However, the white-haired granny remained unmoved. All she did was sit there calmly, looking at Li Xian who was sleeping soundly on the ground. And Tianzhua frowned as Xing shook his head with a bitter smile. After experiencing 1,000 years of torture in the dream, although his body wasn't injured at all, the mental pressure was enough to make any iron-willed human collapse. And Xing and Tianzhua were both people with extremely strong willpower, but they didn't dare say that they could definitely withstand it. Although the white-haired granny said that 1,000-year dream could be shortened, there wasn't much time left in Netherworld City. If Li Xian didn't come out in time, his body would be killed by the rules of Netherworld City even if he could withstand the 1,000-year dream. What should I do? Zhou regretted calling Li Xian over. Zhou tried a few times, but he couldn't rush into the dream torture chamber. He had already used several Terragrade powers. The heaven-opening scripture and Great Brahma were useless, so the others were even more useless. Zhou looked at the antelope. At this moment, he could only rely on this calamity-grade fellow. When the antelope saw Zhou looking at it, it immediately turned its head to the side and pretended not to see him. This bastard! Zhou was somewhat helpless. However, from the antelope's expression, he knew that the white-haired granny in the dream torture chamber definitely had a terrifying background. She was definitely a calamity-grade existence. Come on. Let's do it together. Just as Zhou was worrying, he suddenly heard Li Xian's voice. Zhou hurriedly turned his head and realized that Li Xian hadn't woken up. Instead, he was sleep-talking. But looking at the wretched smile on his face and the unrestrained voice, it didn't seem like he was being tortured in a dream. Use more strength, use more strength. Li Xian cried out with a comfortable expression. Lu Bushun and company were outside as they stared at Li Xian, who was talking in his sleep with odd expressions. They really suspected what kind of dream he was having. Was it really as the white-haired granny had said, that he was being tortured? What did this fellow dream of? Zhou looked at Li Xian and felt that he didn't dream of torture. However, before long, Li Xian's face began to sweat. Not only was he sweating, but he was also heating up. His carapace mask was burning red as white steam constantly rose from his head. Didn't you say that it was just a dream? Why has his body become like this? Zhou stared at the white-haired granny and was already prepared to use immortal culling. Any creature's brain has a limit. Under normal circumstances, the brain can only think about one thing. However, in the 1,000-year dream, time passes too quickly in the dream, while time in reality is too slow. This causes his brain to need to complete the mental work that should have taken a few years or even decades to a century in an extremely short period of time. It's already very rare that his brain didn't explode, the white-haired granny said. Why didn't you say anything before? Zhou asked with a heavy expression. If you need others to say everything and don't think about it yourself, why do you still have a head? The white-haired granny said indifferently. Li Xian's carapace helmet was about to burn. Zhou knew that he couldn't wait any longer. Otherwise, even if he could save Li Xian, he would probably be burned into an idiot. Just as he was about to draw his sword, he suddenly saw Li Xian's carapace suddenly flash with a strange light. With Li Xian's head as the starting point, points of light flowed out like streams of data. They instantly flowed through Li Xian's entire body, making his entire body seem to turn into points of data. This power is... Zhou was slightly taken aback as he found this power somewhat familiar. Soon, Zhou recalled why it looked familiar. Although this power had Li Xian's original strength attribute, it also had the strength attribute of another creature. Alpha. Zhou immediately realized what had happened. Back then, the Guardian Alpha, who was like a nanomachine, had possessed Li Xian. In the end, in order to preserve his life, he had formed a contract with Li Xian in a strange form. Alpha had played a part in Li Xian's advancement to the mythical stage. Now, the power that erupted from Li Xian's body was not only Li Xian's own strength attribute, but also Alpha's strength attribute. However, the two powers had already fused. Li Xian's body seemed to have turned into a stream of data. His entire body seemed to be formed from countless glowing points of light, making him look extremely illusory and unreal. With Zhou eyesight, he could clearly see that Li Xian's body could no longer be called a human's body. The cells on his body seemed to have turned into nanomachines. It was impossible for a human brain to handle so much work in such a short period of time, but now Li Xian was like a super AI as he rapidly processed all sorts of data streams. As his body's digitization became more and more powerful, Zhou also sensed the fluctuations of the Terragrade. Have you advanced to the Terragrade? Zhou looked at Li Xian in surprise and delight. He didn't know if he could survive the 1,000-year dream after advancing to the Terragrade. In the eyes of Lu Bushun and company, the glowing Li Xian was gradually turning transparent. Finally, He completely vanished as though he had turned invisible. Terror transformation? And Jingyu looked at the spot where Li Xian had vanished in horror and finally couldn't help but shout. At present, there weren't many humans who could reach the terror grade. Most of them were humans who had contracted guardians and provided for guardians to advance to the terror grade. Humans who advanced to the terror grade purely by themselves were also very rare, even if they used mythical fluid. Li Xian was clearly different from the people who had contracted guardians. He had transformed his body into the terror form, not just the guardian. End of this chapter. Chapter 1185. Zhouwen could see Li Xian in his terror form. He saw the data streams on his body constantly flicker like a AI that was performing high-speed calculation. Although Zhouwen didn't know much about Li Xian's terror transformation ability, it seemed like the 1,000-year dream wasn't that effective on him. After about half an hour, the high-speed flow of data on Li Xian's body finally stopped. His slumbering body woke up. After escaping his terror transformation, Li Xian's body landed heavily on the ground. Does this count as passing the dream punishment? Do you want to do it again? Li Xian asked the white-haired granny. However, when he looked, he realized that the white-haired granny was gone. Zhouwen and company didn't notice when the white-haired granny had vanished. What's going on? It should be considered a pass, right? Li Xian walked out of the torture chamber. Boom. Just as Li Xian walked out of the torture chamber, he heard a loud bang. The door at the back of Netherworld City slowly opened, revealing a path that led outside. Zhouwen found it odd that he didn't see City Lord Netherworld. The City Lord Netherworld he had encountered the last time seemed to have completely vanished. He hadn't appeared at all. Furthermore, as the door to Netherworld City opened, it wasn't the desert scenery outside. Instead, a bridge appeared. The stone bridge led into the distance, but there was no end in sight. Yellow smoke billowed under the bridge, making it impossible to see anything. At the end of the stone bridge sat the white-haired granny from the dream punishment chamber. However, there was no stone table in front of her. There was only a huge pot. Something seemed to be boiling in the pot, but it was similarly billowing with smoke. It was impossible to see what was being boiled. Could this be the legendary bridge of helplessness and Granny Meng's soup? Lu Bushen's expression changed when he saw the bridge and pot. In fact, the others probably had similar thoughts as him when they saw this scene. The legend of the bridge of helplessness and Granny Meng's soup was well known in the East District. Legend had it that after a person died, they would have a ghost. If a ghost wanted to reincarnate, they had to drink a bowl of Granny Meng's soup to wash away their memories of their previous lives. Only then could they reincarnate as a clean soul. In the 3 realms and 6 paths, all living beings had to drink such a bowl of soup when they reincarnated. This showed how magical and bizarre Granny Meng's soup was. After crossing the bridge of helplessness, one would arrive at the real Netherworld. It wasn't a place where living people could go. At this point, even if it was really hell ahead, Zhouwen and company had no choice but to barge in. And Tianzhua led his men towards the stone bridge. Zhouwen and Li Xian exchanged looks before heading towards the stone bridge together. When Tianzhua and the others approached the stone bridge, the white-haired granny said, "There are no old friends on the Yellow Springs Road. If you want to step onto the bridge of helplessness, you have to drink a bowl of forgetfulness soup first. Since this is really the river of forgetfulness and the bridge of forgetfulness, then this soup should be the soup of Meng Pa that can make one forget their past and present lives, right?" Jingyu asked. "I only know the river of forgetfulness soup. I don't know what Granny Meng soup is." The white-haired granny's expression didn't change at all as she replied calmly. "Aren't you Granny Meng?" Lu Bushun asked. "I'm just a bridge guard. I only know how to guard the bridge and sell soup. I've long forgotten my name." The white-haired granny still had the same expression, as if none of this had anything to do with her. "Then, will drinking your soup cause people to lose their memories?" Lu Bushun asked again. "Yes," the white-haired granny answered. Can I cross the bridge without drinking the soup? Lu Bushun asked again, unwilling to give up. Yes. The white-haired granny's answer exceeded everyone's expectations. However, the white-haired granny continued, as long as you are dead, you can still cross the bridge of forgetfulness without drinking the river of forgetfulness soup. Overseer, it looks like we can only barge our way through, Lu Bushun whispered to Ntienzwa. We can't barge our way through, Zhouwen said. Although he had never seen the white-haired granny, who claimed to be a bridge guard, take action, from the antelope's reaction, her strength was definitely at the calamity grade. Furthermore, this was her territory. If they really fought, it was unknown how many people would survive, much less save them. You will forget everything after drinking the soup. What else can you do if you don't barge your way through? Lu Bushun asked Zhouwen. Zhouwen walked in front of the white-haired granny and sized up the bridge of forgetfulness. He couldn't see anything. All he could see was tumbling yellow smoke. It was unknown how deep the river of forgetfulness was. May I ask if a group of humans came here about 10 days ago? Zhouwen asked. I forgot. I only sell soup, not people, the white-haired granny answered expressionlessly. Then, did you sell soup 10 days ago? Zhouwen wasn't in a hurry as he asked after some thought. I did. This time, the white-haired granny answered Zhouwen's question. Can you tell me how many bowls you sold that time? Zhouwen asked again. 8 bowls, the white-haired granny answered. That's right. It should be Madame Lan and company. According to the traces and information outside, 8 of them should have retreated into Netherworld City, Lu Bushun said happily. Ntienzwa and Nsheng were also energized. It was naturally good news that Madame Lan and company were still alive. Did they drink the soup? Ntienzwa asked. To cross the bridge of forgetfulness, they naturally have to drink the river of forgetfulness soup unless they are dead, the white-haired granny answered. Is it possible to drink the river of forgetfulness soup without losing your memories? Ntienzwa asked again. There's a stone of 3 lives in the river of forgetfulness. If you can engrave your name on the stone of 3 lives, you won't lose your memories of your past and present lives even if you drink the river of forgetfulness soup, the white-haired granny answered. Where's the stone of 3 lives? Lu Bushun hurriedly asked. In the river of forgetfulness. The white-haired granny's answer disappointed everyone. It was unknown how big or deep the river with churning yellow smoke was, nor did they know what the stone of 3 lives looked like. It was no different from searching for a needle in a haystack. Young Master One. And Nsheng looked at Zhouwen. It was a little difficult to find the stone of 3 lives now. If possible, it was best to rush over. However, Zhouwen had previously said that they couldn't barge in. Therefore, Nsheng wanted to seek Zhouwen's opinion. I'll try searching. Zhouwen looked at the river of forgetfulness, hoping to find the legendary stone of 3 lives. The legendary stone of 3 lives was a place that recorded one's past and present lives. However, from the looks of it, this place was somewhat different from the legends. Lu Bushun and the rest all saw Ntienzwa. They still followed Ntienzwa blindly. Find the stone of 3 lives. Ntienzwa glanced at Zhouwen before casting his gaze at the river of forgetfulness. Overseer, we can use companion beasts here. Let me give it a try, an officer said. Zhouwen and company also realized that this place was different from Netherworld City. There was no taboo power that prohibited flight or companion beasts. Ntienzwa nodded, and the officer summoned a silver eagle. Under his control, the eagle flew towards the river of forgetfulness. As soon as it came into contact with the yellow smoke of the river, it seemed to be pulled by something and was instantly pulled into the yellow smoke. Then it disappeared. The eagle pattern on the officer's body also disappeared. Chapter 1186. Ntienzwa's subordinate tried a few more times, but the outcome was the same every time. Regardless of the attribute, breed, or level of the companion beast, as long as it approached the smoke of the river of forgetfulness, it would immediately fall into the river and vanish. It didn't even cause a ripple. It was useless for the companion beasts to attack the river of forgetfulness. All the attacks vanished without a trace the moment they entered the river of forgetfulness. It was unknown how deep the river of forgetfulness was. It was impossible to even enter the river of forgetfulness, much less search for the stone of 3 lives in the river. Zhou Wen and Li Xian also summoned some low-level companion beasts, and got them to approach the river of forgetfulness. However, just like in Tianzhua, none of the companion beasts could survive in the river of forgetfulness. Zhou Wen listened attentively and used great Brahma to strengthen his senses. He looked into the river of forgetfulness but failed to discover anything. "Overseer, let me give it a try." An officer stood up and bowed at Tianzhua. Zhou Wen and Li Xian glanced at the officer and saw that he was wearing a military uniform with a military coat draped over him. He wore a gas mask and a military hat. Zhou Wen and Li Xian had some impression of this officer because his attire was just too strange. Even now, they didn't know what he looked like or what his name was. "Are you confident?" Tianzhua asked the officer. "I saw some clues. I can give it a try," the officer answered. "Go on." Tianzhua nodded slightly. The officer bowed slightly before walking towards the river of forgetfulness. However, to Zhou Wen's surprise, he didn't summon any companion beast. Instead, he really walked towards the river of forgetfulness. He walked very slowly and could be described as careful, but he really stepped into the river of forgetfulness. This action was extremely crazy. Previously, when using companion beasts to scout the way, a mythical companion beast had been sucked into the river of forgetfulness without any ability to resist. It was no different from suicide for the officer to walk in himself. Just as the person took a step forward, the military uniform on his body seemed to be pulled by some powerful invisible force. It tore off the officer's body, along with his military boots, hat, and mask, and fell into the river of forgetfulness. As for the officer's body, he floated above the river of forgetfulness without falling. However, when Zhou Wen and Li Xian saw the officer's appearance, they were alarmed. The body of the officer no longer looked like that of a human. There was no flesh or blood on his body, and all that could be seen was a human-shaped gray smoke. When he walked, the smoke swayed, and it looked extremely strange. Zhou Wen knew that this officer wasn't a monster. He had only used a mythical fluid created by a special dimensional creature. His mutation was relatively high, which was why he had become like this. The humanoid smoke-like officer's feet had already stepped into the river of forgetfulness, but he wasn't sucked in by the river of forgetfulness. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. What dimensional creature mythical liquid is this person using? Interesting, Li Xian said as he looked at the officer in surprise. And Sheng explained, "That's the captain of the 413th Regiment, Jianong. The mythical liquid he uses is made from a strange mythical creature that escaped from Chess Mountain. His body has mutated very severely, but he has also obtained very special mythical powers. From the looks of it, his powers can restrain the power of the river of forgetfulness." "Overseer, I'll go take a look." Jianong saw that it was as he had guessed. The strange power of the river of forgetfulness was useless against him, so he asked Tianzhua for instructions. "Safety first," Tianzhua said. "Yes," Jianong replied and was about to fly down the river of forgetfulness. However, he suddenly saw yellow smoke billowing in the distance, as if something was moving underneath. Moreover, that billowing fog was approaching Jianong at an extremely fast speed. Jianong assumed a stance of battle, but Tianzhua suddenly shouted, "Jianong, come back." When Jianong heard Tianzhua's order, he reflexively retreated and left the river of forgetfulness. The moment he retreated, the spot where he had been standing exploded with yellow smoke, and a blood-colored palm reached out. Each finger of the blood-colored palm was more than a meter long. The gigantic palm seemed to be condensed from blood. With a grab, a terrifying explosion sounded in the air. After missing, the blood-colored palm quickly retreated into the river of forgetfulness and vanished in the blink of an eye. Jia Nong still had a lingering fear in his heart. Although his current body was not afraid of ordinary physical attacks, the bloody palm had only brushed against his body, and the gray fog on his body had melted a lot. If he had really been caught, he would probably have vanished into thin air just now. "What's that?" Li Xian wrinkled his nose. He smelled a strong smell of blood. No one could answer him because no one knew the answer. The white-haired granny guarding the bridge might know the answer, but she didn't say a word. Finding the Stone of 3 Lives was more difficult than they imagined. Currently, the only one who could enter the river was Jia Nong, but he couldn't withstand the blood-colored palm. Lu Bushun said with a strange expression, "Legend has it that the river of forgetfulness is the boundary between life and death. There are countless wraiths that wander between life and death in the river. As those wraiths can't cross the bridge of helplessness, they can't reincarnate. They can only wander the river of forgetfulness forever. If a living person comes to the river of forgetfulness, they will pull them into the river of forgetfulness to replace them, allowing them to escape the restraints of the river of forgetfulness and obtain a chance to reincarnate." That bloody hand just now, was it the legendary vengeful spirit? The one you mentioned is called a scapegoat in myths and legends. By finding a substitute to replace oneself, one can obtain a chance of rebirth, Anxing said. "Yes, it's that scapegoat. Could that blood hand be that thing?" Lu Bushun nodded. "I don't know, but from the looks of it, if we want to find the Stone of 3 Lives, we have to think of a way to finish it off," Anxing said as he stared at the river. "Captain Jia, only you can enter the river now. I can only let you make another trip and lure it out," Tianzhua said to Jia Nong. "Yes." Jia Nong didn't hesitate as he entered the river of forgetfulness again. This time, he was rather careful, but he failed to sense the appearance of the blood-colored hand ahead of time. It was only because Anxing had warned him ahead of time that he could escape in time. When the blood-colored hand appeared, Lu Bushun and the other officers immediately launched attacks at it. Different elemental yuan qi bombarded the blood-colored hand, causing it to scatter in all directions. But in the blink of an eye, the scattered sanguine aura condensed again, transforming into the blood-colored hand before returning to the river of forgetfulness. Chapter 1187. Seeing that their attacks were ineffective, everyone was somewhat dumbfounded. And Tianzhua frowned and said, "From the looks of it, the blood-colored hand should be a creature like a scapegoat. It has an extremely filthy yin attribute. It's very difficult for ordinary powers to injure it. Only the power of extreme yang can do so." Unfortunately, Miss Jing didn't come. Her essence energy art is the nemesis of these filthy yin things, Anxing said with a sigh. "Although I had long expected that we might encounter such a thing, the yang companion beasts we prepared aren't enough to kill the scapegoat. If there's no other way, I'm afraid it's impossible for us to enter the river to find the 3 Lives Stone," Lu Bushun said gloomily. "Commander Jia, can I trouble you to lure the blood hand out again?" "Let me give it a try," Zhou said to Jia Nong. Of course. What Zhou and Li Xian had done was enough to make Jia Nong and company respect them. Therefore, Jia Nong didn't think too much about it. She immediately sought Tianzhua's permission and went down the river again. Perhaps it was angered by the previous attack. The moment Jia Nong entered the river, the blood-colored hand rushed out unexpectedly. As it was too sudden, Anxing didn't have the time to warn her. Just as everyone was alarmed, they suddenly saw a golden light flash. Before the blood-colored hand could grab Jia Nong, the golden light pierced through it. A small golden monkey appeared behind the blood-red hand. It opened its mouth and sucked, and the blood-red mist that formed the blood-red hand was sucked into the monkey's mouth like red milk tea. The blood-red hand was unable to resist at all. The remaining portion of the blood-colored hand wanted to escape back into the river of forgetfulness, but it was already too late. Two of the earrings on the monkey's ears shattered one after another as it transformed into a dark gold behemoth. Golden light radiated from its body, and wherever the golden light went, it dispersed the yellow fog above the river of forgetfulness, revealing a huge blood-colored ghost shadow below. The blood-colored ghost shadow looked neither human nor ghost. It hid in the river, and one of its palms had already been severed. Truth Listener roared and charged above the blood-colored ghost that was fleeing in fear. It opened its mouth and swallowed the blood-colored ghost like it was eating jelly. That's the companion beast that fought Dition. Human Emperor. Could Zhou be Human Emperor? When Njingyu saw Truth Listener transform, he suddenly jolted as he thought of something unbelievable. He widened his eyes and couldn't help but look at Zhou, who was standing by the river of forgetfulness. It wasn't just Njingyu. Anyone who had seen Truth Listener's battle with Dition recognized its appearance. After all, Truth Listener's appearance and battle back then were too shocking. It was a terrifying existence that could fight a calamity grade. Even 5 years later, no human had heard of such a companion beast. No wonder, so that's how it is. No wonder even the instruments of torture in the Yellow City Spring had to listen to young Master Wen's orders. So young Master Wen is His Majesty. I really didn't expect. Lu Bushun said happily. The way everyone looked at Zhou changed. If they were only respectful before, now, their eyes seemed to have the word worship written on them. Being able to fight alongside the human sovereign gave them a sense of glory. Adjutant N. Is young Master Wen really that lord? Lu Bushun was somewhat unsure as he whispered to Nxing. If you think so, then so be it. If you don't think so, then so be it, Nxing said ambiguously. Lu Bushun was somewhat depressed as his heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. As for Truth Listener, it had already displayed its might on the river of forgetfulness. Truth Listener charged into the river of forgetfulness. Wherever it passed, the yellow smoke would be melted by the golden light on its body, revealing one scapegoat after another. However, Truth Listener had an extremely strong restraining effect on dimensional creatures like Scapegoat. As long as the scapegoats approached it, they would be immediately devoured. It was like a fiend celestial. The scapegoats that were originally terrifying now gave people a weak and pitiful feeling. After charging for a while, Truth Listener suddenly realized that there was a strange stone standing by the river where the smoke had dissipated. The stone was 30 feet tall and stood alone very close to the river bank. However, it was different from ordinary river rocks. The stone was red in color, and its shape resembled a baby in swaddling clothes. There was even a faint red glow emitting from the stone. Previously, it had been obscured by the yellow smoke and scapegoats in the river, making it impossible to see its existence. Now that it was right in front of them, they immediately felt that it was extraordinary. Is that the Stone of 3 Lives? Li Xian asked as he sized up the strange stone. No one could answer him. No one had seen the legendary Stone of 3 Lives, so they naturally couldn't tell if it was real or fake. Overseer, let me give it a try, Jia Nong asked Tianzhua. And Tianzhua nodded slightly before Jia Nong flew towards the stone. With Truth Listener there, the surrounding yellow smoke and scapegoats didn't dare approach. Jia Nong successfully arrived in front of the strange stone and revealed his fingers that were flickering with gray smoke. He swiped at the Stone of 3 Lives. The white-haired granny said that as long as one could leave their name on the Stone of 3 Lives, they wouldn't be affected by the river of forgetfulness soup. However, Jia Nong's finger failed to leave any marks on the strange stone. Jia Nong gathered his strength again. This time, he used all his strength. The gray smoke converged into a sharp blade and slashed at the strange stone. The stone remained undamaged without a single mark. Let me give it a try. And Jingyu wanted to use his power of time to leave a mark on the strange stone. He tapped the stone with his finger. Although it was only one finger, there seemed to be countless fingers pointing at the same spot. This move of his was called Water Droplet Pierces Stone. It used the power of time to turn a finger attack into a continuous attack. With Jingyu's current ability, after this finger attack, he had actually repeated the same finger attack more than 300 times. However, the Stone of Three Lives remained unmoved despite such a continuous attack. There wasn't even a mark on it. He couldn't even find a fingerprint. Although the Stone of Three Lives had been found, being unable to leave a name on it was no different from not being able to find it. Everyone couldn't help but look at Tianzhua and Zhou. They suspected that Zhou was human sovereign, so they had more respect for him. When they encountered something, they couldn't help but think of him. However, Zhou and Tianzhua had no intention of giving it a try. Instead, Tianzhua walked back and arrived in front of the Bridge of Helplessness. He asked the white-haired granny, "Elder, how can I leave my name on the Stone of Three Lives?" The white-haired granny said coldly, "The Stone of Three Lives. It's the Stone of Three Lives. Naturally, one has to have a past life to leave their name on it. People without a past life naturally can't leave their names on it." Chapter 1188. Do people really have a past life? Zhou frowned inwardly. He didn't believe in reincarnation. Zhou had always believed that death was death. There was no such thing as a past life or a next life. Won't we know after giving it a try? Li Xian was very curious as he ran to the three-life stone to give it a try. However, just like in Jingyu and company, he failed to leave a mark on the three-life stone. It's indeed a lie. How can I not have a past life? I must have been an emperor in my previous life with 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, Li Xian muttered hatefully. And Tianzhua also got the remaining officers to give it a try, but just like in Jingyu, none of them were able to leave a mark on the three-life stone. Everyone felt that it was very likely that they had been deceived by the white-haired granny. However, when it was Shing's turn, and Shing's finger touched the three-life stone, the extremely hard three-life stone, which no weapon could damage, seemed to turn into sand. And Shing's finger sank into it with a gentle touch. And Shing was slightly taken aback before he casually wrote his name on it. After Shing finished writing his name, his finger left the three-life stone. The name on the three-life stone flashed with golden light before vanishing. Is that considered a success? Everyone looked at the three-life stone and Shing in surprise. And Tianzhua also went up to give it a try, but just like the other officers, he failed to leave any marks on the three-life stone. This doesn't make sense. Isn't it said that all creatures can reincarnate? Why is it that only Adjutant has a past life, but none of us have one? It's not like we have fewer eyes or noses than Adjutant. Why is he the only one with a past life? Lu Bushun mumbled. It doesn't matter if we have a past life or not. The key is how we are going to cross the bridge of helplessness. Only Adjutant can leave words on the three-life stone. We can't just let him go alone, right? And Jingyu said. And Tianzhua frowned in thought. Clearly, he couldn't accept such an outcome. Young Master One, do you want to give it a try? Lu Bushun asked Zhou. Lu Bushun wanted to know if Zhou was human sovereign or if he was just similar to a companion beast. The others also looked at Zhou, wondering if he could leave words on the three-live stone. Although the concept of reincarnation was vague, there were still many people who hoped that there would be a next life. It was a kind of spiritual sustenance. Zhou thought for a moment and walked towards the three-life stone with Yer in his arms. He also wanted to know if he could leave his name on the three-life stone like in Xing. Zhou extended his finger and pressed it on the three-live stone. Everyone's eyes were attracted by his finger. However, when Zhou pressed his finger on it, the three-live stone didn't react at all. Clearly, he was someone without a past life. Just as Zhou was about to retreat, Yer extended her finger and pressed it on the three-live stone. The hard rock of the three-live stone turned extremely soft under Yer's finger. Soon Yer wrote the word Yer on the three-live stone. Could it be that reincarnation really exists in this world? Zhou had a strange feeling when he saw this. Yer was considered half human, half ghost, but when she was first born, legend had it that she was the reincarnation of the Goo God. Now that her name was engraved on the 3 Lives stone, everyone couldn't help but wonder why she could engrave her name. Could she really be the reincarnation of the Goo God? In the end, only Shring and Yer left their names on the 3 Lives stone. However, it was impossible for the two of them to cross the bridge to save Ouyang Lan. Everyone was somewhat vexed. Despite knowing that Ouyang Lan and company might be right in front of them, they couldn't walk over. From the looks of it, we can only barge through. Lu Bushun rubbed his palms together, eager to give it a try. Everyone returned to the white-haired granny again. Zhou knew that it was impossible to barge through. He looked at the white-haired granny and asked, "Apart from leaving my name on the 3 Lives stone, is there no other way to cross the bridge of helplessness without losing my memories?" "No," the white-haired granny answered with certainty. Everyone fell silent. Zhou pondered for a moment before suddenly turning around and walking towards the 3 Lives stone. Even the antelope didn't dare offend the white-haired granny. It was almost impossible for them to barge through, so they might as well think of a solution on the 3 Lives stone. Previously, Zhou had only casually pressed it, not leaving any traces behind. Now that there was no other way out, he had to cross the bridge of helplessness. All he could do was target the 3 Lives stone. He circulated his Terragrade powers and struck the 3 Lives stone, but the outcome was the same. Even the Terragrade powers couldn't damage the 3 Lives stone at all. Zhou changed a few powers of terror and used all the powers of terror he could use, but it was still ineffective. Demon God Body, the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, the clown mask, the singularity universe, and the power of Brahma were all useless. How can I satisfy this condition in my previous life and current life? Zhou frowned in thought. Lu Bushun and company were somewhat alarmed when they saw that Zhou was unable to leave a mark on the 3 Lives stone after so long. If even Zhou couldn't do it, there was probably no hope. I don't believe it. Can't I really leave a mark on it? Zhou began engraving sword pill on his wheel of destiny. Soon, a sword pill appeared in Zhou's palm. Zhou reached out to grab it, and it immediately transformed into a sword. Clang! Zhou held the sword formed from sword pill and slashed at the 3 Lives stone, but there were still no changes. However, Zhou had no intention of stopping. He continued slashing at the 3 Lives stone. He seemed to treat the 3 Lives stone as a test subject as he constantly slashed at it. However, no matter how terrifying Zhou's sword stance was, he couldn't leave a mark on the 3 Lives stone. Indeed, it's just that the companion beasts are of the same species. From the looks of it, young Master One isn't really human sovereign. Lu Bushun began to doubt his previous judgment when he saw that Zhou hadn't even cracked the 3 Lives stone's skin after so long. Human sovereign had slain Tian with a single strike. How domineering was that? Although the sword stance Zhou was using was powerful, it wasn't as powerful as human sovereign's. Furthermore, the weapon in Zhou's hand wasn't the legendary sword. Unbeknownst to them, the immortal culling sword wasn't something that could be used casually. Zhou didn't care what they thought as he continued slashing at the 3 Lives stone. At the same time, he engraved sword pill on his wheel of destiny again and again. He used all the thoughts he had when he was trapped. Not only did it make his sword technique more and more perfect, but it also made sword pill change. Chapter 1189. Although sword pill was in the form of a sword, its essence was a chi refinement technique. It was a dermic formulation that absorbed the heaven and earth aura for one's own use. Ancient chi refinement warriors pursued chi refinement to strengthen themselves so as to reach the illusory realm of longevity. Although he had never heard of any chi refinement warrior reaching the realm of longevity, they continued the humans' belief in survival. Zhou's transformation of chi into a sword wasn't so much like practicing a sword art, but it was more like he was transforming his beliefs into a sword. I use the psyche sword. With a thought, I can live and die. I only wish for my thoughts to be clear in this life. What has my previous life and future life got to do with me? Zhou drew sword pill over and over again, hoping to draw it into the shape of a sword. At that moment, what Zhou was engraving wasn't the shape of a sword, but his beliefs. The sword was like him, and the sword was like his heart. The stronger his heart was, the stronger the sword's sharpness. It's better to take from the straight than seek from the crooked. The sword that Zhou engraved was neutral and calm. The sword was straight, the most traditional sword style of the East District. The sword was like the person. This sword was a portrayal of Zhou himself. However, the sword engraved on the Wheel of Destiny didn't help sword pill advance to the Terror grade. What's missing? What's missing? Zhou reflected on himself. He had spent relatively little time on the Qi refinement technique and sword pill after 100 years of meditation. It wasn't because Zhou didn't like using swords, but because the Qi refinement technique was too monotonous. The word practice and the word enlightenment were enough to summarize the essence of this essence energy art. However, with his body trapped, Zhou could only think but not practice. Without practice, he would lack the most basic link. It was difficult for him to improve further, so Zhou didn't spend too much time on the Qi refinement technique. Zhou slashed down again and again, engraving sword pill over and over again. The sword pill he drew was slightly different every time, but he failed to stabilize it on the Wheel of Destiny. Clearly, he hadn't truly found his heart of the sword. What is my heart of the sword? Slaughter? Protect? Do whatever I want? It doesn't seem to be either. Zhou realized that he didn't seem to understand his heart. It had been a long time since Zhou had failed like this. The previous few essence energy arts had successfully transformed into terror forms, making him feel somewhat smug. He felt that it was only a matter of time before the remaining essence energy arts transformed into terror forms. It still doesn't work? Zhou was somewhat disappointed when the sword pill engraved on the Wheel of Destiny vanished again. Sometimes the hardest thing to understand was not the opponent, but oneself, because people could see others, but not themselves. Before the advent of mirrors, no one knew what they looked like. It could be said that they were the most familiar strangers. Using a mirror as a mirror, I can see one's appearance. Using a person as a mirror, I can see one's heart. I haven't met someone who can let me see myself. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to condense a true sword heart. Zhou's mind was in turmoil. He knew where his flaws were, but he had no intention of giving up. He wanted to find another way. Since I haven't understood my heart, can I use other methods to replace it? Zhou thought of the immortal culling sword. Back then, when he killed Di Tian with a single strike, he had personally experienced the terrifying sword intent of the immortal culling sword. No one understood the intent and conviction of that sword better than him. As Zhou recalled the immortal culling sword, he continued engraving on the Wheel of Destiny. Lu Bushun and company saw that Zhou had struck the 3 lives stone countless times, but he failed to leave a mark on it. Instead, the sword condensed in his hand shattered again and again. They felt that there was no hope. Overseer, can we think of a way to avoid crossing the bridge of helplessness and directly cross the river of forgetfulness? Lu Bushun said as he sized up the river of forgetfulness. And Xing shook his head and said, Legend has it that the river of forgetfulness is the boundary between the Yin and Yang worlds. From the Yang world to the Yin world, it's no longer a matter of distance. If we can cross it without crossing the bridge of helplessness, there wouldn't be so many wraiths trapped in the river of forgetfulness. But this isn't a solution. Young Master Wen's sword art is so powerful, but he can't leave a mark on the 3 lives stone. I'm afraid this path won't work, Lu Bushun said with a sigh. Overseer, why don't I go over to take a look first? And Xing suggested. He wanted to cross the bridge of helplessness to find Ouyang Lan and company. Wait a little longer, Tianzua said as he looked in the direction of the Bridge of Helplessness. Lu Dashun and company were somewhat puzzled. They didn't know what Tianzua was waiting for, but Tianzua's words were military orders. They didn't dare ask any further and could only continue waiting. On the other side, the sword formed by Zhou Wen's sword pill was becoming more and more like the immortal culling sword. The more the sword pill resembled the immortal culling sword, the more illusory it looked to others. It was faintly discernible as though it was about to disappear. Clang! A strange sword sound alarmed Lu Bushun and company. Everyone turned their heads and saw Zhou Wen standing in front of the Three Lives stone empty-handed. On the indestructible Three Lives stone, there was an additional foot-long sword mark. Following that, they saw Zhou Wen's palm wave in the air, as though he was holding an invisible sword. As Zhou Wen waved his palm, rubble flew out from the Three Lives stone as sword marks appeared one after another. Soon the words Zhou Wen were carved. The strokes of the two words were like the blade of a sword. Every stroke was filled with a chilling sword intent. Just looking at the two words made Lu Bushun and company feel a chill run down their backs as they subconsciously took half a step back. What a terrifying sword intent! After coming to their senses, everyone realized that it was only the sword intent contained in the words. The words Zhou Wen were carved on the Three Lives stone, but they didn't disappear like in Xing and Ye'er's names. It was unknown if the name carved in such a manner was effective. Ah Xing, I'll cross the bridge with you to take a look. Zhou Wen retracted the terror sword pill and secretly glanced at the information on his phone. Terror form. Incomplete sword pill S-grade. Although the name was somewhat problematic, it was within expectations. After all, this was a terror sword pill he had formed by imitating the immortal culling sword, not a manifestation of his own sword heart. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no time to wait, Zhou Wen wouldn't have chosen this path. It was safer to advance to the terror form with his sword heart. Overseer, why don't I go over with young Master One to take a look? And Xing asked Tianzua again. And Tianzua didn't answer, and Xing, as he looked at the white-haired granny and asked, "Does the name engraved count?" "Just leave your name," the white-haired granny said calmly. When Tianzua heard that, he turned around and walked towards the Three Lives stone. As he walked towards it, a strange figure appeared behind him. It was a white humanoid armored creature. It floated behind Tianzua and had a device that looked like a rocket thruster on its back. It held a sword in one hand and a weapon that looked like a Gatling gun in the other. It looked like a modern single-soldier robot. Chapter 1190. Ta. The Gatling-like weapon fired wildly at the Three Life stone. The muzzle spat out blue sparks. When the bullets hit the Three Life stone, they actually nailed in. Row after row of bullets forcefully nailed the words, Tianzua, into the Three Life stone. Old Zhao, you are in charge of commanding this place. Everyone stay here and wait for us to return, Tianzua said as he walked towards the Bridge of Helplessness. Overseer. Lu Bushun and Jingyu wanted to say something, but Tianzua waved his hand to stop them. This is an order, Tianzua said as he walked to the Bridge of Helplessness. As he walked, the robot-like creature had already transformed into armor that enveloped his body. What's that? Zhou Wen looked at Tianzua in surprise. When the armor enveloped his body, Tianzua's figure vanished from the eyes of ordinary people. Only Zhou Wen could still see him. Without a doubt, this was the result of his terror transformation. However, Tianzua didn't transform into his terror form. What he transformed into was the robot-like creature that had transformed into armor. It would be understandable if it were a guardian, but it wasn't a guardian. It didn't have the aura of a guardian. In fact, Zhou Wen had seen Tianzua use something similar in the past. It was likely his life soul, but this life soul was very different from before. This difference wasn't completely due to the terror transformation. There seemed to be another factor mixed in. Could it be that Tianzua didn't use the mythical liquid himself, but instead fused his life soul with something similar? Zhou guessed, but he didn't know if he was right. Overseer, I'll take the lead. Wait a while before going up. And Sheng hurriedly ran over, hoping to step onto the bridge of helplessness before Tianzua. However, a spoon stopped them. The white-haired granny held a bowl of soup in her other hand and said expressionlessly, "Drink the river of forgetfulness soup before you can step onto the bridge of helplessness." And Sheng took the bowl without hesitation and looked at the churning yellow smoke in the bowl. He brought it to his mouth and swallowed all the yellow smoke in the bowl. And Tianzua looked at Sheng from the side and didn't stop him. Zhou was extremely nervous. "Overseer, I'm fine. I still have my memories." And Sheng waited for a while and confirmed that he hadn't lost his memories. Then, he said to Tianzua, "Overseer, I'll head to the bridge first. After I reach the other side, you can head to the bridge if there are no problems." With that said, Sheng stepped onto the bridge of helplessness and carefully walked towards the other side. Every few steps Sheng took, he would turn his head and shout. However, Zhou and company could only see him open his mouth, but they couldn't hear any sound. It was just a short distance away, but it was as though there was an invisible barrier blocking his voice. The bridge of helplessness was an arch bridge. When Sheng walked to the highest point of the bridge, his body suddenly vanished as though he had walked into another world. Upon seeing this, Tianzua picked up a bowl of river of forgetfulness soup and downed it in one gulp. He turned to look at Zhou and said, "Don't take risks with your. Leave her here." With that, Tianzua stepped onto the bridge of helplessness. Zhou didn't let go of Yer. Although Tianzua was indeed doing it for Yer's sake, Zhou still believed that it was safer to keep Yer by his side. Zhou reached out to take the river of forgetfulness soup, but to his surprise, his hand was blocked by the white-haired granny's spoon. "What are you doing?" Zhou asked with a frown. And Tianzua also stopped and looked at the white-haired granny. Lu Bushun and company also surrounded him. "You don't have to drink it," the white-haired granny said expressionlessly as she retracted her spoon. "I don't need to drink the soup to cross the bridge?" Zhou looked at the white-haired granny in puzzlement. Lu Bushun and company were also puzzled. "Yes," the white-haired granny answered. "Why?" Zhou asked. "There's no reason. You don't have to go if you don't want to." The white-haired granny still had a dead expression as though nothing was worth moving her. Zhou was somewhat depressed. If he had known that he didn't need to drink the river of forgetfulness soup, why would he have gone through the trouble of leaving his name on the 3 live stone? "What about her?" Zhou asked as he pointed at Yer. The white-haired granny didn't say a word as she handed him a bowl of river of forgetfulness soup. Yer looked like a child, but her soul wasn't. Without waiting for Zhou to say anything, she took the bowl of river of forgetfulness soup and drank it in one gulp. And Tianzua didn't continue forward immediately. After seeing that Yer had finished drinking the river of forgetfulness soup and hadn't lost her memories, he turned around and walked to the other side of the bridge. "If there's any danger, go back first," Zhou said to Li Xian. "Don't worry. If there's danger, I'll run faster than anyone," Li Xian said with a smile. "Then I'm relieved." He turned around and carried Yer before walking onto the bridge of helplessness. To his surprise, not long after Zhou stepped onto the bridge, the antelope and chick followed him. The white-haired granny glanced at them and didn't stop them, nor did she let them drink the river of forgetfulness soup. The chick landed on Zhou's shoulder while the antelope slowly followed behind him. It looked like it was here for a vacation, and from time to time, it would look at the river of forgetfulness under the bridge. Zhou was somewhat surprised. He never expected the antelope to follow him. He didn't know what it was up to. Seeing Zhou walk on the bridge of helplessness with a bird and an antelope, Lu Bushun and company's expressions turned odd. Lu Bushun couldn't help but run to the bridge and squeeze out a smile on his fat face as he asked the white-haired granny, "Well, Granny, if they can cross the bridge without drinking the river of forgetfulness soup, can we do the same?" The white-haired granny ignored him and tapped the bowl with a spoon. Her meaning was obvious. If they wanted to cross the bridge, they had to drink the soup first. This isn't fair. Why do we have to drink the soup when they can choose not to? Lu Bushun deliberately said unhappily. In fact, he wanted to get the reason from the white-haired granny. The white-haired granny rolled her eyes and smashed the spoon in her hand onto Lu Bushun's head, smashing his body into the mud. Only his head was exposed, like a carrot planted in the ground. "Do you think it's fair now?" the white-haired granny asked coldly. "Fair, too fair." Lu Bushun couldn't move his body, so all he could do was squeeze out a fawning smile and nod repeatedly. Zhou walked onto the bridge of helplessness and looked into the river of forgetfulness. The scenery he saw was different from what he saw on the bank. Under the bridge wasn't a bottomless abyss, nor was there billowing yellow smoke. There was only a tiny river below. The river water was clear and not deep, but beneath the bridge were skeletons that covered the entire riverbed. It was like hell. From the outside, the bridge seemed endless, but when he really stepped onto the bridge, he realized that it wasn't that long. Zhou didn't walk far before he reached the top of the arch bridge. When he took a step forward, the scene in front of him changed again. "I just want to game in peace" will continue to be updated on Green Bean. There are no advertisements on the site, so please bookmark and recommend Green Bean. If you like I Just Want a Game in Peace, please bookmark I Just Want a Game in Peace. Green Bean updates the fastest. Chapter 1191. Zhou had heard his grandfather tell him many ghost stories since he was young. Many of them were about the netherworld. He had heard plenty of stories about King of Hell, and Judge Imp. In Zhou impression, Fengdu City should be after crossing the Bridge of Helplessness. Fengdu City was also the legendary ghost city. Legend had it that the 10 kings of Hell lived in Fengdu City. There was also an earlier ghost Tharch, Earth Count, who also lived in Fengdu City. However, the place he lived in was called Yudu in legend. Regardless of which legend it was, one should be able to see some legendary mighty figures and ghost city after crossing the Bridge of Helplessness. However, the scene Zhou saw when he stood on the Bridge of Helplessness was somewhat different from what he had imagined. There was no Fengdu City, no King of Hell, not even a small temple. On the other side of the Bridge of Helplessness, there were only 6 huge doors. On them were the words Celestial Path, Azura Path, Hell Path, Hungry Ghost Path, Animal Husbandry Path, and Human Path. Ansheng and Tianzuo were standing in front of the 6 doors as though they were hesitating over which door to enter. Zhou walked over with Yer in his arms. Ansheng and Tianzuo weren't too surprised to see the chick and antelope come over. Over the past 5 years, the chick and antelope had followed Anjing, who had disguised as Zhou and had shown many strange things. Furthermore, Ansheng was in charge of taking care of them when Zhou wasn't around. With Ansheng's attentiveness, how could he not discover the antelope's uniqueness? Upon seeing Zhou come over, Ansheng said, "These 6 doors should be the legendary 6 paths of reincarnation. Legend has it that once ghosts enter, they will reincarnate, but it doesn't say what will happen to living people when they enter." Zhou thought for a moment and said, "If this is really a land of the 6 paths of reincarnation, with so many living beings dying on Earth every day, this place would have long been filled with ghosts. How can it be so quiet? It's probably just a dimensional zone." And Xing nodded slightly. Although that's the case, since there are 6 paths, it's very likely that there's a taboo power that corresponds to the 6 paths of reincarnation. We have to be wary of this. Furthermore, we don't know which door Madame and the others have entered. If we were to try one by one, it would waste too much time. Zhou sized up the 6 doors and said, "In theory, entering the human Dao door is naturally the most normal choice." And Tianzua, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "She won't choose humanity." "Why?" Zhou was puzzled. And Tianzua didn't answer. By the side, Anxing hurriedly explained, Madame's personality is a little different from the average person. If it were the average person, they would definitely choose the safest human path. However, if it's Madame, she will definitely think further. Perhaps such an obvious hint like the human path is a trap in itself. As such, she will choose another door. Of course, this is just an example. In fact, Madame might have thought more. With her personality, the possibility of her choosing to take the human path is indeed very small, Anxing added. Zhou thought for a moment and felt that what Anxing said made sense. From the few times they met, Ouyang Lan was indeed someone who didn't play by the rules. The first time Zhou went to her place for a meal, she had tricked her daughter. Back then, Zhou was truly shocked. Then, which door will Sis Lan choose? Zhou sized up the other 5 doors. His understanding of Ouyang Lan was limited, so he really couldn't guess which path she would choose. Didn't I just say that Madame's personality is unique? It's really hard to guess which path she will take, Anxing said helplessly as he spread out his hands. And Tianzhua suddenly said, although her personality is unique, it's definitely not the kind of person who will act recklessly. She will definitely choose a path that we can guess. Anxing looked at Tianzhua and asked, Overseer, in your opinion, which path will Madame choose? I'm thinking, Tianzhua answered. Anxing looked at the doors and said, the animal path shouldn't be possible. Madame loves beautiful people so much, so it's impossible for her to want to transform into other creatures. The hungry ghost path, the hell path, and the animal path are known as the 3 evil paths. They aren't good places either, so the chances of Madame choosing them aren't high. The remaining heavenly path and azura path are both possible. Typically speaking, ordinary people would choose the legendary heavenly path that has good karma, but with Madame's personality, she might choose the azura path. What kind of place is the azura path in the legends? Zhou only knew the name of the 6 paths and didn't have a deep understanding of them. The azura path is the fiendish path. Usually, falling into the fiendish path refers to the azura path. However, the azura path is also listed as one of the 3 good paths. The reason behind it is very complicated, so I haven't understood it in detail, Anxing explained. And Tianzhua looked at the azura path's door and said, Azura is spread across the 6 paths. The heavenly path has heaven azura, the human path has human azura, the hell path has hell azura, and the hungry ghost path has hungry ghost azura. Azura is the manifestation of the path they are in. They are ever-changing and different. However, the only similarity is that azura is warlike. It's the same no matter which path they are in. Sheng, you are right. With my wife's personality, she is most likely to choose the azura path. Furthermore, she can only choose the azura path, Tianzhua said as he walked towards the azura path's door. Why? Anxing asked in puzzlement. Although the possibility of it being the heavenly path was lower, it wasn't impossible. Tianzhua said without turning his head, it's because after watching a certain battle in the past, she doesn't have a good impression of anything with the word heaven in it. She even wants to change the word heaven in my name, so she definitely won't choose the heavenly path. Which battle is it? Why don't I know? Anxing asked. However, Tianzhua didn't answer him. He had already walked through the azura path's door. Zhou was also somewhat curious as to which battle had made Ouyang Lan dislike the word heaven. Young Master One, let's go in as well. Seeing that Tianzhua had vanished, Anxing called out to Zhou and immediately rushed through the azura path's door. Zhou was just about to follow when he suddenly felt a forced tug at the corner of his shirt, pulling him to the other side. Looking down, he saw the antelope biting the corner of his shirt and pulling him to the other side. What are you doing? Zhou asked the antelope. The antelope wrote a few words on the ground with its hooves. Ouyang Lan didn't enter azura path. Follow me. How do you know that she didn't enter azura path? Zhou asked in disbelief. Why do you think Ouyang Lan entered here? the antelope asked. She encountered danger and was forced in, Zhou answered. Since she knows that there's danger and that you will definitely come to save her, and Tianzhua can guess that she entered Azura Path, so she definitely knows that if she enters Azura Path, it's very likely that you will face those dangers. What do you think she will choose? The antelope said. You mean that in order to prevent us from being in danger, she will do the opposite and take a path that Tianzhua will definitely not expect? Zhou immediately understood what the antelope meant, as he couldn't help but look at the heavenly path. And Tianzhua had said that Ouyang Lan hated the word heaven, so it was impossible for her to choose the heavenly path. If the antelope's guess was right, Ouyang Lan was most likely to enter the heavenly path. Chapter 1192. Although this was only the antelope's guess, Zhou felt that it made sense. Since Tianzhua and company had entered Azura Realm, it was double insurance for him to head to the heavenly realm to take a look. The antelope led the way into the heavenly realm. Zhou carried Yer and the chick and followed. The heavenly realm's door was like water. When Zhou's body touched the door, he sank in before arriving in front of a huge mountain. How big could a mountain be? In Zhou's imagination, it was at most the size of the Himalayas. However, the mountain in front of him gave Zhou the feeling that it had no end or peak. Looking around, he couldn't see beyond the mountain. Looking up, he couldn't see the top. Then, Zhou realized that he was actually very far away from the mountain. However, because the mountain was too big, it formed a sense of oppression that gave him the illusion that he was at the foot of the mountain. With a thought, Zhou used teleportation to get close to the mountain, but after teleporting several times, he was surprised to discover that he was still so far away from the mountain. It was as though he wasn't close at all. Walk over, the antelope wrote on the sandy ground. Zhou nodded and walked forward with Yer in his arms. Before long, he suddenly saw a figure fly over. Flying sky. Zhou sized up the figure in the sky. It was an extremely beautiful woman. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, making her look like an otherworldly fairy. However, she had the aura of a dimensional creature. It was somewhat similar to the fairies Zhou had seen in the past, but there were also some differences. Moreover, this flying woman's body was suffused with a strange light, causing her skin to look as moist and translucent as milk. It's a celestial, the antelope wrote on the ground. You've been here before? Zhou asked the antelope. The antelope didn't answer, but the celestial woman had already flown over. Before Zhou could decide what to do, the chick spat out a ball of golden flames and burned the celestial woman to ashes. An essence energy crystal fell from the sky and landed in the sand. Zhou picked up the essence energy crystal and used his phone to look at it. He realized that it was a 64-valued essence energy crystal. Clearly, the celestial woman was a mythical existence. The group continued walking forward and soon saw a few more celestials. There were men and women among them, and all of them were extremely handsome. Furthermore, they were mythical creatures. Unfortunately, the chick wasn't romantic at all. It spat out golden flames and burned all the celestials it saw to death. Another 2 crystals dropped, one of which was a crystal with 80 constitution. It allowed Zhou to replenish his stats. Although he had advanced to the mythical stage for a long time, his stats hadn't reached perfection. Only one stat had reached 81 points. These celestials are clearly at the mythical stage. Why do they look so weak? Zhou asked the antelope in puzzlement. Although the chick was very strong, those heavenly beings were at the mythical stage after all. It didn't seem reasonable for them to be burned to death without any resistance. The antelope curled its lips and wrote on the ground, "Weak? You'll know soon enough whether they're weak or strong." When Zhou asked again, the antelope didn't say anything else as it walked in the direction of the mountain. On the way, they encountered some celestials, but they were burned to death by the chick. Those celestials weren't the fastest and weren't strong. No matter how one looked at it, they were at the bottom of the mythical stage. They were about the same as the mythical fake immortals in Deer Terrace Pavilion, or even weaker. Zhou hadn't approached the mountain despite teleporting a few times. Now, he was getting closer and closer to the foot of the mountain. When he was about to reach the foot of the mountain, he suddenly saw a female celestial glowing with red light at the foot of the mountain. After discovering Zhou and company, the female celestial flew over. The chick mercilessly opened its mouth and spat out a ball of golden flames. However, this time, the chick's flames failed to burn the female celestial to death. She actually dodged the flames spewed out by the chick. The chick flapped its wings in annoyance and rushed forward to spit out balls of golden flames. However, the female celestial's movement technique was extremely outstanding. Her figure flew and danced as she dodged all the chick's flames. As she flew, the red light on her body flowed like petals. It looked extremely beautiful. When the chick rushed over and touched the red petals, the petals automatically disappeared like bubbles. The female celestial only dodged and didn't counterattack. It didn't look like she would take the initiative to attack. Zhou watched for a while, and the more he watched, the more puzzled he became. Although the female celestial's movement technique was very good, even comparable to Zhou's transcendent flying immortal movement technique, the chick's movement technique and speed were higher than the female celestial's. They were both at the mythical stage, so logically speaking, it didn't make sense for the chick to not be able to finish her off after so long. However, the reality was that the female celestial dodged all the chick's attacks with ease, leaving Zhou frowning. This was no longer a problem of movement techniques and speed. Zhou had already noticed that the female celestial had strangely dodged the chick's attacks several times in impossible situations. The chick was about to succeed several times, but it ended up failing. Its ferocity was immediately triggered as it raised its head and let out a long roar. Golden light bloomed from its mouth as golden flames spewed out like a tidal wave, transforming into a rolling sea of fire that enveloped a large area, burning the female celestial to ashes on the spot. Unfortunately, the female celestial didn't leave anything behind. How strange. Don't the celestials here hurt others? Zhou frowned in thought. From the battle just now, the female celestial hadn't launched any attacks from beginning to end. It wasn't that she didn't have a chance, but she didn't seem to have any intention of attacking. This was the first time Zhou had seen such a dimensional creature. She has already attacked. It's just that you didn't see it. If it were any other mythical creature fighting her, it wouldn't be this situation, the antelope wrote on the ground. She's not at the mythical stage. There's no reason I can't see her attack. Even if she's at the mythical stage, I should be able to see it. Wait, could her attack be the red light on her body? Zhou immediately understood that there was definitely something wrong with the red light. It was just that the chick's physique was too strong, so it wasn't affected. This is just the beginning. The fun is yet to come. After the antelope finished riding, it headed for the mountain. Before long, he saw the celestial glowing with red light again. However, this time, it was a man, and the chick went up to fight again. Just like before, the celestial dodged the attacks that were almost certain to hit several times, infuriating the chick. It spat out a sea of fire and burned the celestial to ashes. Chapter 1193. Although the chick still had the absolute advantage, it was very amiss for the chick that was almost invincible at the same level to have such difficulty dealing with a mythical creature. Although there weren't many celestials here, they weren't few either. The red celestial man wasn't a rare species, but it was actually able to fight the chick to such an extent. It left Zhou somewhat surprised. Zhou had already noticed that the problem was with the celestial's movement technique. After watching for so long, Zhou still couldn't figure out what was going on with the strange movement technique. Walking along the winding mountain road to the top of the mountain, they soon saw the red light celestial being appear again. The little bird was no longer as energetic as before. Although the consumption of energy was nothing to it, fighting with the red light celestial being made the little bird somewhat depressed. It no longer actively rushed forward. Zhou wanted to figure out what was going on with the red celestial man's movement techniques, so he summoned 2 golden battle god halberds and made them fly at the red celestial man from both sides. The golden battle god halberds were extremely sharp, and their offensive strength was rather good at the mythical stage. However, they were just too clumsy. The 2 golden battle god halberds attacked the red celestial man, but they failed to touch a single hair on it. A strange scene happened at the same time. In the constant battle, red rust appeared on the golden battle god halberd's golden body. Furthermore, the red rust increased, making the 2 originally resplendent golden divine weapons look like scrap metal that had been thrown in a pile of trash for a few years. Is this the ability of the red celestial man? Zhou Wen's heart palpitated. He had never seen such an ability. Thankfully, the chick could resist this power, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. Clang! A golden battle god halberd covered in rust smashed at the red celestial man, but it failed to hit it. Instead, it failed to retract its momentum and smashed into the mountain wall beside it. The golden battle god halberd snapped just like that as a mythical companion beast vanished. Holy sh*t, what's going on? Zhou widened his eyes. It was a mythical creature after all, but it could snap after smashing into a rock. This was truly bizarre. Now, Zhou finally understood what the antelope meant. It wasn't that these celestials weren't strong, but that their strength was different from ordinary dimensional creatures. What kind of power is this? Zhou retreated a distance to ensure that he wouldn't be affected by the red light before asking the antelope. After all, he was only at the mythical stage. Although he had Terragrade abilities, he hadn't reached the level of the Terragrade. It was better to be careful. Zhou didn't wish to be touched by that strange power before he figured out what it was. Dang! Before the antelope could answer, the other golden battle god halberd snapped due to the severe rust. It made Zhou lose 2 mythical companion beasts in a short period of time. He couldn't help but feel the pinch. Although it was relatively easy for the golden battle god halberd to drop, and Zhou still had 2 on him, its skills were still pretty good. No one would complain about having more skills for an offensive pet. After the golden battle god halberd died, the red glowing celestial flew towards Zhou. Now, looking at the flower-like red light on her body, Zhou didn't find it pretty. He only found it a little horrifying. Not daring to let the red glowing celestial approach, Zhou summoned Banana Fairy. Banana Fairy blew out a gust of grand wind and froze the red glowing celestial in midair. Then, she slammed into the mountain wall and her body turned into ice shards. She died on the spot. A companion egg that suffused a red glow drop. Zhou was delighted as he hurriedly picked it up and hatched it. A mythical companion egg wasn't enough to surprise Zhou. However, with this companion egg, he could know what stats and skills a celestial had. It would be of great help to his subsequent journey. Zhou refused to believe that there weren't any Terragrade celestials in such a place. If he could figure out the abilities of a celestial before encountering a Terragrade celestial and what methods he could use to restrain them, the danger would be greatly reduced. With the injection of essence energy, the red glowing celestial companion beast transformed into a red stream of light that rushed into Zhou body, forming a symbol of a goddess on his shoulder. Although Zhou had already received some information from the goddess, he still looked at the mysterious phone's data. He was more used to such intuitive data. Naked Celestial, Mythical Life Providence, Heavenly Man Karma Life Soul, Crimson Light Wheel of Destiny, Little Celestial 5 Blight Strength, 63 Speed, 78 Constitution, 62 Essence Energy, 71 Innate Skills, Flying, Luck, Blessing, Companion Form, Celestial Clothes. After Zhou seriously looked at all the abilities of the naked celestial woman, he finally understood why the chick had failed to hit her so many times. Not only did the naked celestial woman have good movement techniques, but what was even more terrifying was that she had abilities like luck, blessing, and blessing. Although these abilities didn't seem to have any offensive power, their effects were definitely terrifying. As for the Wheel of Destiny ability of the Celestial Five Blight, coupled with the abilities of luck and blessing, it was even more sick. The Celestial Five Blight could make the enemy unlucky. Not only would they be unlucky, but they would also age and die. The enemy would become unlucky, while she had luck and blessing. It was obvious how difficult it was for the opponent to hit her. Although this naked celestial woman's combat strength isn't strong, these skills and abilities are really powerful. If skills like luck and blessing can be used on combat pets, it would be even more sick. Zhou finally understood why the naked celestial woman could sometimes dodge attacks in such an unbelievable manner. It wasn't that her movement technique was strong, but that her opponent was unlucky. She was just too lucky. The only pity was that the naked celestial woman's luck and blessing skills were only effective on her. They didn't affect the people around her. Everything else is fine. No matter how lucky she is, she can't dodge large-scale attack. However, this Celestial Five Blight is a little troublesome, Zhou thought to himself. Legend had it that the Celestial Five Blight was an ominous sign before a celestial died. It was also divided into the Minor Five Blight and the Major Five Blight. Now, it had become a Celestial's Wheel of Destiny ability. Just the power of the Lesser Fifth Blight was already so strange. If they encountered a Greater Fifth Blight or a Terragrade Celestial, they might suffer a Celestial Fifth Blight. They wouldn't even know how they died. What kind of power can break through the Celestial Five Blight? Zhou carefully thought through all the companion beasts he had. Among the few Terragrade existences, Banana Fairy and the Celestial Five Blight didn't have much of a relationship. Ice Maiden was about the same. Jade Rabbit and the Seven Seas Dragon King were most likely to be countered. There didn't seem to be a single power that could counter the Celestial Five Blight. The one most likely to counter it was Truth Listener. Of Zhou few powers, only the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder might be useful. End of this chapter. Chapter 1194. Zhou planned on finding a naked celestial being to see if Truth Listener and the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder were useful. It was better to test it on a mythical naked celestial than a Terragrade celestial. He continued to walk along the mountain path, wanting to find another naked celestial being. However, before he could get far, he saw a female celestial flying toward him. As he didn't see golden light transform, Zhou didn't know if she was at the Terragrade. After some hesitation, he didn't rush forward. Instead, he summoned the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General and got him to charge at golden light. Zhou wanted to give it a try. He wanted to see if stats like Heavenly Decay, Luck, and Blessing were effective against a companion beast like the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General that had explosive negative powers. After all, the Jinx's master skill had always been a sore point for Zhou. Even if the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General died, he wouldn't feel the pinch. The fiend-armored Tiger Soul General rushed forward and brandished his demonic spear to stab at Heavenly Man Golden Light. Heavenly Man Golden Light didn't attack either. All he did was circle around the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General and dodge its attack. However, after the golden lotus emitted from his body touched the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General, it fused into its body. It was probably the same as the Crimson Celestial Being's ability. It had the effect of Celestial Decay, but it was unknown if it was Minor 5 Decay or Major 5 Decay. After a while, Zhou revealed a look of pleasant surprise. Not only was the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General unaffected by the golden light celestial being, but the demonic purple flames in its body had become even more exuberant due to the injection of the golden lotus. From the looks of it, Not only will the Heaven Man 5 Blight not make the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General unlucky, but it will accelerate his growth. Zhou watched for a while and saw that the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General was getting stronger and stronger. Heavenly Man Golden Light was in a sorry state from the pursuit and had a few wounds on his body. Her Heavenly 5 Blight wasn't very effective against the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General. Her luck and blessing skills didn't seem to be of much use either. They were greatly restrained by the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General. Before long, the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General slashed the Golden Light Celestial Being under his spear. Unfortunately, nothing dropped. Golden Light Celestial Being's speed and strength were stronger than Scarlet Celestial Beings, but it was still within the mythical stage. It hadn't reached the Terror grade. Knowing that the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General could also restrain Heaven's 5 Blights, Zhou felt much better. He charged forward with the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General and encountered several Crimson Celestial Men and Golden Light Celestial Men. After Zhou testing, although Truth Listener's evil vanquishing was effective against heavenly decay, it couldn't completely remove it. On the other hand, the heaven-opening scripture of the Highest Elder could perfectly restrain the heavenly blight. As long as he activated the heaven-opening scripture of the Highest Elder, the heavenly beings wouldn't pose any harm to him. This way, Zhou felt much more at ease. Even if he encountered a Terror-grade Celestial, he would be invincible. However, along the way, Zhou didn't discover any clues related to Ouyang Lan. This made Zhou suspect that Ouyang Lan had come to Heaven Realm. Are we wrong? Did Sis Lan think that Tianzhua would think the same as us? That's why she did the opposite and took the Azura path? Zhou said after some thought. The antelope looked at the mountain path in front of it and rode on the ground. That's possible, but we're already here. Don't you want to go up and take a look? You're the one who wants to go up, right? What's up there? Zhou felt that the antelope might not have taken this path to save Ouyang Lan from the beginning. The antelope seemed to know that it had no choice but to say it. It wrote, "There's something on the mountain that can help the chick undergo terror transformation. Even if the person you're looking for isn't there, this trip won't be in vain." What is it? Zhou continued asking. I wonder if that thing is still there. Let's go up and take a look first. The antelope refused to say as it lowered its head and continued walking up. Zhou thought for a moment and followed. He couldn't be sure that Ouyang Lan hadn't come to Heaven Realm. Since he was already here, it was better to continue walking forward. As Zhou walked, he engraved on the Wheel of Destiny, keeping a few terror transformations in order to deal with any unexpected situations. With the Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General leading the way, he killed quite a number of Scarlet Celestials and a few Golden Celestials. A skill crystal of a Scarlet Celestial dropped. Zhou didn't immediately learn it. Instead, he put away the skill crystal and continued forward. He didn't know how tall the mountain was. Instead, Zhou estimated that they had climbed thousands of meters, but they still couldn't see the peak. It was unimaginable how big the mountain was. Clang! The Fiend Armored Tiger Soul General killed another Golden Celestial and a companion egg dropped. Zhou was delighted as he picked up the companion egg and hatched it. The companion beast that hatched was called Golden Celestial Man. The Golden Celestial Man's stats were very similar to the Scarlet Celestial Man. The only difference was that his life soul was called Golden Body Light. Everything else was basically the same. Even the Wheel of Destiny was Minor Celestial Man 5 Blight. There wasn't the Greater Celestial Man 5 Blight that Zhou was looking forward to. As he continued on his way, Zhou heart couldn't help but skip a beat when he arrived at a platform. He saw an altar built on the platform. On the altar sat a Celestial. This Celestial was clearly different from the previous Celestials. The light on his body was black. Furthermore, he couldn't be seen without using the Wheel of Destiny. A Terror-grade Celestial. Zhou's heart palpitated. He originally wanted to unsummon the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General, but to his surprise, the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General charged forward as though he could see the Terragrade Celestial. The Celestials from before didn't seem to attack, but this black Celestial was different. Just as the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General rushed over, he slapped him. A black beam of light tore out of his palm and instantly struck the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General, sending it flying back. It slammed into the mountain wall, causing a huge dent in the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General's armor. When Zhou saw this, he hurriedly unsummoned the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General. Although he sometimes wanted to kill the fiend-armored Tiger Soul General, he couldn't bear to watch him suffer such heavy injuries. After condensing Sword Pill, Zhou activated the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. At the same time, he used Little Evil's mask to teleport and appeared behind the black celestial before slashing at his head. However, coincidentally, the black celestial had turned his body one step ahead of time and dodged Zhou strike. Zhou heart palpitated, but he didn't stop. As he constantly teleported, Sword Pill stabbed out again and again. Every strike was extremely bizarre, making it impossible to dodge. Strangely, no matter how fast Zhou teleportation was or how accurate his sword was, the black celestial dodged it. It was as though he could predict the future. He could dodge any attack from Zhou in advance. No matter how fast the sword was, it was difficult for it to injure him at all. Chapter 1195. Zhou was secretly alarmed. This was the result of the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder protecting him. From the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder's frantic conversion of essence energy, it was obvious how terrifying black light celestial being's 5 blights power was. If it were someone else, not to mention not being able to hit the black light Deva, it was likely that their life would have already been taken away by the power of the Deva 5 decay. Zhou sword technique was already as fast as lightning, but it couldn't touch a single strand of black light man's hair. How can I crack black light person's luck and blessing skill? Zhou knew that if he couldn't crack black light person's skill, it would be useless no matter how fast his sword was. The antonym of luck is bad luck or bad luck. Speaking of bad luck, Tai Sui should be the best choice. However, Tai Sui's combat strength isn't strong. It's fine against microorganisms, but it's probably useless against a celestial. Furthermore, this is a Terragrade celestial. A mythical Tai Sui is probably useless. As Zhou thought about it, he suddenly thought of something and took out the bamboo blade he had previously put away. Bamboo blade was one of the 4 gentleman blades. Legend had it that it was cursed with bad luck. It was unknown if it was of any use. Now, Zhou could only treat a hopeless situation as a last resort. There was nothing else he could do. If it didn't work, he could only get Banana Fairy to take action and see if an area of effect attack was useful against Black Light Man. However, after slashing a few times, he failed to injure Celestial Black Light. Just as Zhou was feeling disappointed, the bamboo blade sliced through Celestial Black Light's sleeve. Looks like it's still useful. Zhou was overjoyed as he injected the power of fear into the bamboo blade and slashed at Black Light Man again and again. Soon, Zhou realized that the chances of bamboo blade hitting the Black Light Man were very low. Only 1 strike out of 100 strikes could hit. Furthermore, it was very difficult to hit a vital spot. Even so, Zhou was already overjoyed. As long as he could encounter Immortal Blacklight, he would have a chance to kill him. It was better than having no chance at all. If 100 slashes were not enough, then he would make 1,000 slashes. If 1,000 slashes were not enough, then he would make 10,000 slashes. There would come a time when he would die. Zhou transcendent flying immortal was fast enough to begin with. Coupled with the clown mask's teleportation ability, he was unbelievably fast. Saber beams flashed as though they were slashing at immortal blacklight from all directions. It was unknown how many strikes he had delivered. The wounds on Immortal Blacklight's body gradually increased. Although they weren't fatal, they were still enough to injure him. In the end, Immortal Blacklight's body was densely covered in saber wounds, and he was forcefully scraped to death by Zhou. A strange Terragrade creature was brutally killed by Zhou just like that. In the end, all that was left was a pile of bones. Its flesh and blood had been stripped dry. Zhou didn't want to be so cruel, but he had no choice. Apart from that, he couldn't kill Black Light Man at all. Clang! A companion egg that emitted black light fell out of Black Light Celestial Man's body, leaving Zhou overjoyed. A Terragrade companion egg. Zhou hurriedly picked up the companion egg. He never expected it to be so easy this time. Furthermore, this black radiant celestial being's ability was so special. It would definitely be of great use in the future. The companion egg's black light flowed as though it contained infinite mysteries. Zhou didn't hesitate to hatch it. With a large amount of essence energy surging in, the companion egg finally transformed into a black stream of light that entered Zhou's body. Zhou hurriedly took out his phone and looked at the information inside. Heaven Azura, Terragrade Life Providence, resembling heaven, not heaven life soul, mandate of heaven wheel of destiny, minor celestial 5 blight terror form, great celestial 5 blight speed, 94 strength, 91 constitution, 93 essence energy, 91 talent skill, luck, blessing, falsified heaven, Shura transformation companion form, saber. So the great celestial 5 blight is the power of the terror form. It's no wonder I didn't see it on the golden body celestial man and the naked celestial man. However, this fellow is actually called Heaven Azura. That means he's an Azura of the Celestials. Zhou couldn't help but be overjoyed when he saw his stats. His companion form is a saber. If I use the saber transformed from Heaven Azura to slash at other Heaven Azuras, what will happen if they are augmented by luck and blessing? Zhou thought to himself as he summoned Heaven Azura in the form of a saber. The Shura saber was a long and narrow saber. It was slightly curved and pitch black in color, but it suffused a cold glow. It looked cold and mysterious, like a lunar arc left behind when a lunar eclipse couldn't cover the entire moon. Zhou held the saber and continued walking up the mountain. He couldn't wait to see if the saber had any restraining effect on Heaven Azura. Soon, Zhou and company encountered another celestial. Unfortunately, it wasn't a Heaven Azura, but a naked celestial man. Zhou slashed out as the Shura saber slashed at the bare-bodied celestial. Zhou didn't use much strength in this strike. He even deliberately converged his strength, but the bare-bodied celestial was still beheaded with one strike. It's indeed useful. Zhou still wanted to give it a try and see if it was effective against Heaven Azura, so he continued walking up the mountain. In the beginning, he didn't want to encounter celestials, but now, he was eager to meet them. In the end, he only encountered some naked celestials and golden body celestials. He didn't encounter any Heaven Azura. After killing 11 celestials in a row, quite a number of stat crystals dropped, but he didn't see any companion eggs or Heaven Azura. This left Zhou somewhat disappointed. As he walked forward, he suddenly saw a tree growing on the mountain wall in front of him. Ever since Zhou and company entered the celestial realm, they hadn't seen any plant. There were sand and rocks everywhere. It could be said that not a single blade of grass grew. However, there was a crooked tree growing on the mountain wall in front of them. The roots of the crooked tree were embedded in the mountain wall, and the tree trunk was hanging outside. Zhou didn't recognize what tree it was, but he could see some red fruits on the tree. The fruits were the size of a fist and looked a little like the fruits of a construct tree. When the antelope saw the tree and fruits, its eyes lit up. As for the chick, it was even more direct. It flapped its wings in a bid to fly towards the crooked tree. The antelope pressed the chick down from the sky with its hoof and rode on the ground with its other hoof. That tree is extraordinary. It has already become a sage. It is not to be easily desecrated. Is that tree what you're looking for? Zhou asked. The tree is useless. The fruit on the tree is very useful. I never expected it to still be here. However, it's a little difficult to pluck it, the antelope continued writing. Zhou looked at the fruit on the tree and frowned slightly. If even a calamity-grade antelope said that it was difficult, it was really difficult. What's that fruit? How can I pluck it? Zhou looked at it for a while and didn't discover any danger, leaving him somewhat puzzled. He didn't see any celestials near the tree, nor were there any other dimensional creatures. If the fruit on the tree was so precious, why didn't they pluck the fruit with so many celestials here? How could it be growing there all of a sudden? Chapter 1196. Do you know what mountain this is? The antelope asked as it wrote. I don't know. Zhou had no idea what mountain it was. He had never been here before, and there was no monument at the foot of the mountain. It's terrifying to be uncultured. Since you know that this is the heavenly realm, haven't you heard of Mount Meru? The antelope revealed a look of disdain. This is Mount Meru? Then, is the legendary Sakura living on the top of this mountain? Zhou looked up at the mountaintop, but he still couldn't see the end. You sure are overthinking things. That's not something you should be thinking about now. It's better to think about how to pluck the fruit. The antelope continued writing. Since you have heard of the word Mount Meru, you should know about mustard seed Mount Meru, right? I don't think I've paid attention to this word. What does mustard seed Mount Meru mean? Zhou really hadn't paid attention to such knowledge. He had chanced upon Mount Meru while reading Buddhist scriptures in the past. He had only read it as a story and hadn't studied it in detail. The antelope was somewhat speechless as it explained. Mustard seed refers to an extremely tiny space. Mount Meru refers to Mount Meru. Mustard seed Mount Meru means that an extremely tiny space can accommodate a mountain. Storage space? Zhou immediately thought of a term. Something like that. That's roughly what it means. The antelope nodded slightly. What does this have to do with that crooked tree? Zhou asked as he sized up the tree. That's a mustard tree. The fruit on it is a mustard seed, the antelope answered. The fruit is a mustard seed? Didn't you say that a mustard seed is extremely tiny? Why is that fruit so big? Zhou found it unbelievable. Who told you that the fruit is a mustard seed? The antelope wrote disdainfully. Zhou was first taken aback before he understood what the antelope meant. He stared at the fruit and said, You mean that there are many mustard seeds in that fruit? A mustard seed can accommodate a Mount Meru. There are many mustard seeds in that fruit. If you reach out to pluck it, you will immediately fall into the endless space. You might not be able to rush out your entire life. Then how do I pluck it? Zhou asked. I don't know. If it were that easy to pluck, it wouldn't still be there. Even calamity-grade creatures might not be able to escape if they fall into that endless space, the antelope said. You don't even know how to pluck them. What's the point of bringing us here? Zhou frowned. Solutions are thought of by humans. You are also considered a human. Don't you know how to think? The antelope rolled its eyes at him. I don't want that mustard fruit. I'm just here to look for someone. Why should I want it? If you want it, think of a way yourself. Zhou ignored the antelope and prepared to descend the mountain. From the looks of it, Ouyang Lan did not come here at all. Otherwise, when they passed by the Heaven Azura, they would have left some traces. Even if they had a way to avoid fighting the Heavenly Azuras, they should have at least left some traces of using their skills. However, they didn't find anything along the way. If the chick eats those fruits, it can advance to the Terra grade, the antelope wrote unhurriedly. The chick is fire elemental. If it wants to eat, it should eat the dragon fruit. Why would it eat something like the mustard fruit that clearly has spatial attribute? Zhou felt that the antelope was trying to trick him into plucking the mustard fruit. The antelope patiently explained, It's true that phoenixes are fire elemental, But have you ever thought about why phoenixes can constantly undergo nirvana rebirth without truly dying? Phoenixes' nirvana and revival are naturally fire elemental powers. What's there to say? Zhou said. From this, we can tell that you don't understand phoenixes at all. You're too superficial. Fire elemental powers represent destruction and termination, as well as rebirth. However, it's not enough to rely on fire elemental powers for Phoenix's nirvana. The antelope pointed at the mustard fruit and continued writing. A mustard fruit is a mustard world. 1,000 mustard worlds are a small world. 1,000 small worlds are a medium world. 1,000 medium worlds are a great world. 3,000 worlds refer to great worlds. Look at how many mustard fruits there are on the tree. 3. Zhou said after glancing at the mustard tree and confirming it. 3 mustard fruits represent the 3,000 world. If the chick can swallow 3 mustard fruits, it will obtain the spatial powers of the 3,000 world. When that happens, it will truly obtain the ability to undergo nirvana rebirth. As the saying goes, there's no fruit without roots in the world. If it wants to undergo nirvana rebirth, it needs a rebirth tinder. Only by leaving behind a tinder in the 3,000 worlds will it have the possibility of undergoing nirvana rebirth in the future, the antelope wrote. Is that so? Zhou stared at the antelope, momentarily unable to tell if it was bluffing him or telling the truth. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Anyway, without the mustard fruit, the chick will probably need thousands of years to advance to the terragrade. This is also if you're lucky enough. Just wait patiently. With that said, the antelope released its hooves that were pressing down on the chick. The chick still wanted to fly towards the mustard fruit, but it was called back by Zhou. From the chick's reaction, although what the antelope said might not be true, there was no doubt that the chick wanted the mustard fruit. How can I pluck the mustard fruit? Furthermore, even if I pluck it, if there's really the 3,000 worlds inside as you said, how can the chick eat it? Zhou asked the antelope. You need to think of a way to pluck it, but you don't have to worry about eating it. Those 3 mustard fruits only represent the 3,000 worlds, but they aren't the real 3,000 world. As long as you can pluck them, it will cut off its energy supply and the spatial powers will naturally convert. When the time comes, there will only be 3 fruit. How difficult would it be for the chick to eat them? The antelope had clearly thought of it. Even if it's not the real 3,000 worlds, the spatial powers of the mustard fruit are too terrifying. It probably won't be that easy to pluck it. Zhou thought to himself about how he could pluck the mustard fruit. It won't be your turn if it's easy. They will have long been plucked clean by celestials, the antelope said. Zhou thought for a moment and really thought of a solution. Hence, he said, I do have a solution, but I don't know if it will work. Let's give it a try. With that said, Zhou plucked a rock from the ground beside him and weighed it in his hand. Then, he threw it at a mustard fruit on the mustard tree. Zhou's move was naturally the sky-stealing sun-swapping technique. As long as the rock touched the mustard fruit, he could exchange it for the mustard fruit. However, Zhou wasn't sure if this technique was useful against a spatial-type mustard fruit. The error-free chapter of I Just Want to Game in Peace will continue to be updated on Green Bean. There are no advertisements on the site. Please bookmark and recommend Green Bean. Please bookmark me if you like. I Just Want a Game in Peace. I Just Want a Game in Peace. Green Bean updates the fastest. Chapter 1197. The stone quickly flew close to the fruit. Just as it was about to approach the fruit, it suddenly vanished. It was similar to when Zhou used teleportation. The antelope didn't lie to me this time. That mustard fruit is indeed spatial. There's a huge space inside. The mark Zhou had left on the stone was still there. He could sense that the stone had been teleported to a special space. I don't know if it will work. Zhou could still sense the spatial mark on the stone. He planned on continuing to try the sky-stealing sun-shifting art, but he didn't know if he could succeed under such circumstances. After all, the stone had been sent into another space. It was hard to say if the sky-stealing sun-shifting art could work. The clown mask that represented the Godfiend era and the Singularity universe that represented the sky-stealing sun-shifting art circulated at the same time, producing a strange resonance. Zhou sensed the spatial mark on the stone and used the sky-stealing sun-shifting art. This technique combined the two spatial elemental powers of fear. The moment he used it, Zhou realized that the fruit had undergone a strange change. The mustard fruit that was growing on the branch suddenly turned into a fist-sized stone. In the next second, the stone shattered and the mustard fruit inside fell out. Zhou was overjoyed. He knew that he had succeeded. He actually swapped the mustard fruit with the stone in the mustard space, but there was no space in the stone, so the mustard fruit naturally fell out. However, the mustard fruit had already left the mustard tree. Without the energy supply, the spatial powers on the mustard fruit were clearly much weaker. Without waiting for Zhou to catch the mustard fruit, the chick rushed out excitedly. Like a golden bolt of lightning, it swallowed the mustard fruit in midair. After the chick swallowed the mustard fruit, its figure suddenly vanished. However, it immediately appeared elsewhere, but it vanished again. When it appeared again, it was in another place. The chick seemed to be constantly teleporting as its figure flickered. It took it a while before it gradually stabilized. Seeing the chick slowly return to normal, Zhou heaved a sigh of relief. He picked up another stone and used the sky-stealing sun-shifting art to obtain a mustard fruit. The little bird was very sentimental. It flew over and swallowed the second mustard seed fruit. This time, its figure flickered even more violently. Its figure kept disappearing and reappearing in different places. This time, it lasted for a long time, but the bird still did not completely return to normal. Even if it stood there without moving, its body would suddenly disappear and then reappear. Not good, there's a scary guy coming. Quick, pick the third one. The antelope suddenly made a sound instead of riding on the ground. Its expression turned extremely grim. Zhou also felt that something was amiss. He saw dark clouds billowing on the mountain, instantly causing the entire world to darken as though it was the end of the world. Almost at the same time, a beam of light tore through the dark clouds and descended. It illuminated the area where Zhou and company were. The light was just too fast. Before Zhou could pluck the third fruit, the light had already scattered down, illuminating the area. Pure Lands of Bliss Domain. F***KU. I haven't lived enough. I don't want to go to Western Paradise. The antelope let out a strange cry as the third vertical eye at its glabella suddenly opened. Its entire body emitted cracking sounds. The antelope was originally thin and weak, looking like a malnourished antelope. But at that instant its body became as strong as a bull. The horns on its head were snow-white and crystalline, like curved blades. A sanguine beam shot out from its vertical eye, transforming into a blood-colored barrier that enveloped the surrounding area. Boom! The light collided with the blood-colored barrier, causing it to waver and shrink a lot. However, it ultimately withstood the terrifying light and didn't let it descend. At that moment, Zhou had already used the sky-stealing sun-shifting art to pluck the last remaining mustard seed fruit. However, the chick was still constantly traversing through space. Even it couldn't control its body. It wanted to fly towards the third fruit, but during its flight, its body was constantly forced into a state of spatial traversing. When it appeared again, it was in another place. After several attempts, the chick failed to approach the fallen mustard seed fruit. What are you waiting for? Quickly take the fruit and run. When that fellow comes down, we will all be doomed, the antelope cried out. Its vertical eye was already streaming tears of blood, as though it was about to split open. The blood-colored barrier also wavered as it was compressed smaller and smaller, as though it would shatter at any moment. Without any hesitation, Zhou teleported over and grabbed the fallen mustard seed fruit. Then, he grabbed the chick and wanted to take it away. However, just as he grabbed the chick's body automatically traversed through space and disappeared from Zhou Wen's hand, appearing elsewhere. Zhou Wen saw that the situation wasn't right. The chick's body was too unstable, so it was impossible to grab it. He made a prompt decision and took out the chaos bead. When the chick teleported out again, Zhou Wen stuffed it into the chaos bead space and stuffed the remaining mustard seed fruit inside. When he didn't see the chick teleport out again, Zhou Wen fled down the mountain at full speed. Seeing that Zhou Wen had succeeded, the antelope turned around and ran. It ran much faster than Zhou Wen, and in a moment it was in front of him. Rumble! However, the radiance kept attacking the antelope. Furthermore, it became more resplendent and resplendent. It caused the antelope's blood-colored barrier to produce cracking sounds as many cracks appeared. The radiance was penetrating through. After suffering such a heavy blow, blood spewed out from the antelope's vertical eye as its eyeball almost exploded. F***ku, do you really think I don't have any goods? The antelope cursed and suddenly opened its mouth to spit out something. At the same time, it shouted, "Grand Supreme Elderly Lord is as urgent as the law." Freeze! With that, the antelope spat out another mouthful of blood onto the item it had spat out. It was a yellow talisman. After the blood was spat out, the yellow talisman emitted a sanguine glow as a blood-colored Dao talisman shone like a lamp. The yellow talisman flew to the blood-colored barrier and stuck to it like a seal. The blood-colored barrier that was about to shatter actually stabilized and didn't shatter from the radiance. Zhou Wen was still surprised by the might of the yellow talisman when the antelope charged over. With a flick of its horn, it sent Zhou Wen and Yer flying. It leaped into the air and allowed Zhou Wen and Yer to land on its back. In the next instant it galloped away without any regard for its life. It was so fast that even Zhou Wen felt the scenery on both sides rapidly recede. Furthermore, it became very blurry. Boom! A world-destroying beam of light descended and heavily bombarded the blood-red light shield. Even with the power of the yellow talisman, the blood-red light shield was still shattered. Terrifying light scattered down. Chapter 1198. Pooey! 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 The antelope shouted as it spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. The 3 mouthfuls of blood turned into 3 blood flowers that rose up and blocked above their heads. Boom! The terrifying light collided with the 3 blood flowers, producing a terrifying shockwave that sent the antelope, Zhou Wen and company flying. The antelope's majestic body was already covered in blood patterns. Blood spewed out of its vertical eye. In midair, it suddenly transformed into a sanguine beam and flashed with Zhou Wen and Yer. It rushed out of Mount Meru and headed straight for the Heavenly Realm's exit. Only then did the 3 blood flowers shatter. The light continued chasing after the antelope and company. Just as it was about to catch up, the antelope had already rushed to the Heavenly Realm's entrance and leaped out. However, the light was unable to leave the Heavenly Realm and failed to chase after them. The antelope landed on the ground, and its front legs went limp as it fell to the ground. Zhou Wen landed on the ground and hurriedly turned to look at the antelope. He saw that it had already crawled up. The vertical eye on its forehead had vanished, but there was a bloody mark at its glabella. Its body had also returned to the appearance of a normal antelope. However, its body was still stained with blood, and blood was seeping from the corner of its mouth. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, the antelope cursed, "That bastard on Mount Meru caused me to lose the bet. When I recover from my injuries, I'll definitely storm up Mount Meru and capture those bastards to bleed them one by one." Zhou Wen looked at the antelope in shock. The antelope's appearance had overturned his previous understanding of antelopes. In the past, this fellow was lazy, lying on the sofa and ignoring others. Furthermore, he didn't speak at all. Occasionally, he would use his hooves to write a few words, looking cold and aloof. But now, this antelope was like a gangster in society. It kept spewing vulgarities. "Well, do you want me to treat you?" Zhou asked as he looked at the antelope's body. Even Mount Laojuan's 9 revolutions golden pill can't treat my injuries. Can you? The antelope was clearly in a bad mood. It glared at Zhou before spitting in the direction of the heavenly realm's door. Pooey! You mentioned a bet. What bet is it? Zhou asked curiously. The antelope rolled its eyes in annoyance. It's none of your business. Don't worry about it. After a pause, the antelope asked, How's the chick? Did you eat the 3rd mustard fruit? Zhou looked into the chaos bead. He also wanted to know how the chick was. However, the moment he took a look, his expression changed. He scanned the chaos bead several times but did not find the little bird. Oh no, the chick is gone. Don't tell me it's still in the heavenly realm? Zhou immediately turned anxious. Is the 3rd mustard fruit still there? The antelope was very calm as it asked after some thought. Zhou was slightly taken aback as he understood what the antelope meant. He hurriedly looked into the chaos bead and realized that the mustard fruit was indeed gone. The mustard fruit is gone, Zhou said. Then it's fine. After some time, the chick will naturally complete its evolution and return. Wah! As the antelope spoke, it suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Its body trembled and it nearly fell. It looked like its injuries were indeed not light. I have a dragon tiger pill essence here. It has the effect of reviving the dead. See if it's useful. Seeing that the antelope's situation was terrible, Zhou summoned the mythical dragon tiger pill essence. If not for the antelope risking its life, it would have been difficult for them to escape alive. Although the dragon tiger pill essence was rare, there would always be a chance for it to drop in the future. In such a dangerous place, the combat strength of the antelope was more useful than a pill essence. That low-grade item is useless to me. Keep it for yourself. The antelope glanced at Azurapath's door and continued, The person you are looking for is probably in Azurapath. If you want to go, be careful. I'm injured, so I won't be playing with you. The antelope was straightforward. With that said, it turned around and walked towards the Bridge of Helplessness, hoping to leave the strange 6 paths of reincarnation. As it walked, it cursed. I've suffered a huge loss this time. Sooner or later, I'll skin those bastards alive and hang them on the flag for sky lanterns. As Zhou watched the antelope walk onto the Bridge of Helplessness, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Don't tell me this fellow can't speak when he made a bet with someone? Without any time to think, Zhou gritted his teeth and turned to walk towards Azurapath's door. Since Ouyang Lan and company weren't in the Heavenly Tao, they were most likely in Azurapath. Azurapath was a demonic path, so it wasn't safer than the Heavenly Tao. It might even be more dangerous. Since there were calamity-grade existences in the Heavenly Tao, there were definitely some in Azurapath. Now, Zhou only hoped that Ensheng and company were fine. Taking a deep breath, Zhou walked into Azurapath. The moment he entered, Zhou was given a fright. He saw a saber that suffused a cold glint cleave down at him, about to cleave at his face. Thankfully, Zhou was prepared. The Shura blade in his hand blocked the saber in front of him. Crack! The Shura blade was a manifestation of Heaven Azura. A Terra-grade weapon couldn't be compared to an ordinary weapon. When the weapon touched the Shura blade, it immediately snapped into 2. The Shura blade didn't stop as it sliced the saber-wielding figure into 2. Only then did Zhou see clearly that the creature that was slashing at him was a humanoid creature wearing a ghoul mask. Its muscular upper body was naked, and there was a strange bird pattern tattooed on its back. The strange bird pattern occupied almost his entire back and left shoulder. It looked like a peacock, but it was blood-red. As for his lower body, he wore a black feather suit. It looked like a skirt or pants, but he couldn't tell what it was. Kill! A tsunami of battle cries sounded, causing Zhou's eardrums to buzz. As far as the eye could see, there were such creatures everywhere on the ruined land that resembled an ancient battlefield. All of them held sabers in their hands, and their eyes were filled with killing intent as they charged at Zhou like a tidal wave. Zhou brandished the Shura blade and instantly killed countless nearby creatures. However, the other creatures continued charging forward without fear of death. As Zhou killed them, he charged forward, hoping to find Ensheng and company first. However, before he could go far, Zhou discovered a problem. The creatures he had killed actually came back to life. Even though their bodies had been sliced into several pieces, they could still automatically piece back together. In the blink of an eye, there were no more wounds as they continued charging forward. Strange? Heaven Azura is a Terragrade saber. Ignoring the fact that these creatures with combat strength that doesn't even seem to have reached the mythical stage, even mythical creatures would probably die. Yet, they are completely fine. Something doesn't seem right. Zhou discovered a problem as he charged forward while pondering. Ensheng and company would probably be in trouble if they were entangled by these undying monsters. Now, Zhou only wanted to find them as soon as possible. With his previous experience, Zhou didn't teleport. All he did was constantly charge forward on land. With the Shura blade in hand, the tide-like creatures couldn't stop him at all. Chapter 1199. After Ensheng and Entianzhua entered Azura Path, they encountered the same situation as Zhou. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for them to wait for Zhou to enter before taking action. All they could do was charge in. Ensheng suspected that Ouyang Lan and company had entered Azura Path. This place was so dangerous. Even if Ouyang Lan and company had really entered, they might have retreated. After all, such a battlefield was too dangerous. There were Shuras everywhere, and there was no chance of rest. However, Entianzhua seemed to be certain that Ouyang Lan had come here. He kept charging into the depths of Azura Path. After Entianzhua put on the armor, he was in existence at the Terragrade. He held a gun that resembled a Gatling gun in his hand as he crazily fired at the devil-like Shuras. Wherever he passed, large numbers of Shuras collapsed as their bodies were smashed. However, it didn't take long for the Shuras to stand up again. Their bodies returned to their original state as they pounced forward again. There was no lack of mythical existences among the Shuras, but against Entianzhua's firepower, their bodies were blasted apart before they could even charge forward. Occasionally, one or two of them would slip through the net and be killed by Ensheng. The two of them charged all the way, and after charging for an unknown distance, a strange altar appeared in front of them. The altar was formed from black stone pillars. There were a total of 12 stone pillars, and there was a flag erected on the stone pillar in the middle. The flag fluttered in the wind, and there was a picture of an anchor on it. Entianzhua and Ensheng didn't look at the flag. Their gazes were focused on the stone pillars. They saw a few people tied to different stone pillars. One of the stone pillars was Ouyang Lan. The people on the other stone pillars were the Sunset Army generals who had come to Netherworld City with Ouyang Lan. They were chained to the stone pillars, and all of them were on the verge of death. Most of them had already fainted. Upon seeing the whip marks on Ouyang Lan and company, their clothes were torn and blood seeped out of the cracks in their clothes, and Tianzua's eyes instantly turned cold. The Gatling gun spewed out tongues of fire as the firepower seemed to become even more violent. It forcefully blasted the group of Shuras in front of it into sieves. Even powerful mythical existences were as fragile as paper in the bullet's storm. And Tianzhua flew up and wanted to rush to the altar to save Ouyang Lan and the others. Suddenly, a cold light appeared and shot toward Tianzua's chest like a phantom. The cold light was so fast that it reached his heart in the blink of an eye. And Tianzhua didn't have time to adjust the muzzle of the Gatling gun. Dang! The great sword in Tianzua's other hand swung down like a ghost and collided heavily with the cold light. Sparks flew in all directions. The cold light was actually an arrow. The tip of the arrow collided with the hilt of the sword. Sparks flew everywhere, and Tianzua's body uncontrollably took a step back. The arrow also deviated from its trajectory and shot into the ground beside him. Rumble! A large hole was blasted in the ground, but the arrow had disappeared. And Tianzua frowned as he looked in the direction of the altar. He saw a man wearing purple armor and a devil mask standing on one of the stone pillars of the altar. He held a hunting bow in his left hand and opened the palm of his other hand. The arrow that had disappeared reappeared in his palm and was gently pinched between his fingers. "Are they finally here? I've been waiting for you for a long time," the person said indifferently as he looked at Tianzua. "Who are you?" And Tianzua stared at the person and asked slowly. The person had the aura of a guardian, but he couldn't sense the aura of a human. It was unknown if there were any humans inside the armor. "Saint Xiao," the person said calmly. "Were you waiting for me?" And Tianzua didn't immediately rush towards the altar and only asked coldly. "Yes." Xiao nodded slightly. "You forced them to come here just to lure me here?" And Tianzua continued to ask. Xiao nodded before shaking his head. "Half and half. If you die, they will die too." "Why?" And Tianzua didn't get angry as he continued asking. Xiao didn't answer but suddenly laughed. "People say that a son should be like Tianzua. From what I see today, you're nothing much. Your mother is being hung here by me, and I don't even know if she's dead or alive, but you're still in the mood to chat with me." And Tianzua's expression didn't change as he looked at Xiao and said, "Since you're unwilling to say, let me guess." "Oh, then why don't you take a guess?" Xiao looked at Tianzua with interest. "You wanted to kill us because we were investigating the expedition team." And Tianzua's tone wasn't a question, but an affirmative statement. "Is that all your guess?" Xiao didn't deny it. It wasn't difficult for him to come to this conclusion. "You come from the Holy Land," and Tianzua continued. "That's right." Xiao nodded and admitted it. He smiled at Tianzua and said, "From the word saint I just said, you can confirm that I come from the Holy Land. It's not difficult to guess." "You come from the trajectory Holy Temple," and Tianzua said again, unmoved. Xiao was somewhat surprised this time. He looked at Tianzua and asked, "How did you know I came from the trajectory Holy Temple?" "It's not difficult to guess. You can guess it yourself," and Tianzua said indifferently. Xiao laughed. "You are indeed an interesting person. I can't bear to kill you. Unfortunately, you will perish here today. There will no longer be an Tianzua in this world." With that said, Xiao raised the hunting bow in his hand and nocked an arrow. However, he wasn't aiming at Tianzua, but at Ouyang Lan, who was on the stone pillar. "It's best you don't move. You should know that with my arrow speed, I can definitely kill her before you arrive. If you want her to live temporarily, sever one of your arms. Then I can give you a chance to fight me," Xiao said. "You have already lost. You don't have the confidence to defeat me," and Tianzua said to Xiao. Xiao said indifferently, "I just don't like it being too troublesome." "Is that so?" And Tianzua's sword-wielding hand suddenly moved. He slashed at his right arm, chopping off the arm that was holding the Gatling gun. Clang! The Gatling gun and arm fell to the ground, blood splattering everywhere. "Overseer!" And Sheng was alarmed and furious. "Do you still want my left arm? I can still give it to you," and Tianzua said coldly as he stopped Sheng from coming over. Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly as he slowly moved the bow and arrow in his hand away from Ouyang Lan and slowly aimed at Tianzua. He said coldly, "Tianzua, Overseer and Luoyang's god of war, you have the right to be arrogant, but you chose the wrong time and place to be arrogant. You also chose the wrong person. There are many people who have said such things to me. They are basically dead," and Tianzua said indifferently. Chapter 1200. Is that so? Xiao pointed his bow at Tianzua as the arrowhead gradually lit up like a light bulb. As time passed, the light from the arrowhead became stronger and more intense, like a sun. "Sun true body, sun strafe art?" And Tianzua was slightly taken aback. It was fine if it was the Sun true body. As long as he went to the Sun Holy Temple, he had a chance of obtaining it. However, according to what he knew, only Jing knew the Sun strafe art. He had previously believed that Zhou Wen had also cultivated it, but he later realized that Zhou Wen didn't cultivate the Sun strafe art. Most importantly, only the Yin family had the Sun strafe art. It didn't seem like it would be taught to outsiders. At the instant Tianzhua was in a daze, the arrow shot out. Like a falling sun, it charged at Tianzhua with an extremely intense force. Tianzhua only had one arm left. He held the broadsword and his eyes were firm and determined. He raised the broadsword and slashed at the sun. Boom! The dazzling light that resembled the sun was sliced apart by the broadsword. The blade collided with the arrowhead, and a terrifying light exploded like a hydrogen bomb. The surrounding shuras were instantly annihilated as Sheng was sent flying by the shockwave. Thankfully, although Sheng hadn't reached the Terragrade, his skills and companion beasts were very magical. He escaped in midair and dissipated the force that struck him. After the radiance, Tianzhua stood in his spot with the broadsword in hand. A large area around him had turned into a deep crater. The shattered shuras were squirming and recovering. "Where did you learn the Sun strafe art?" Tianzhua stared at Xiao and asked. "Aren't you very good at guessing?" "Then guess," Xiao said with a scoff. Tianzhua clearly wasn't a person who liked to waste his breath. The broadsword in his hand slashed at Xiao on the stone pillar. Xiao stood on the stone pillar without moving until the broadsword was in front of him. Just as it was about to touch his hair, his body seemed to distort. Not only did he not retreat, but he charged at Tianzhua. Due to the distortion of space, the broadsword seemed to automatically avoid him and brushed past him. Instead, the hunting bow in Zhao's hand slashed at Tianzhua's neck with the bowstring as a blade. The broadsword was clumsy to begin with, and with the two of them being too close, Tianzhua couldn't block in time. Everyone thought that Tianzhua would dodge, but he didn't. At the instant the bowstring approached, he opened his mouth and bit the bowstring with his teeth. The bowstring instantly snapped. Almost at the same time he snapped the bowstring, Tianzhua swung his sword horizontally at Xiao Luo's waist. Zhao's figure turned and drew an arc. It didn't look fast, but he managed to dodge the attack of the big sword. The big sword's attack seemed to have been distorted. It should have hit Zhao's blade, but it passed right in front of him. "It's the Dugu family's movement technique," Tianzhua said, but his sword did not stop. It slashed at Xiao again. "Didn't you say that I came from the Trajectory Holy Temple? What's so strange about knowing the Dugu family's movement technique?" Xiao Luo's figure was erratic as he dodged Tianzhua's attacks again and again. Tianzhua knew that the truth was not as Xiao had said. The Dugu family's movement technique had indeed come from the Trajectory Holy Temple, but what the Trajectory Holy Temple had given them was only the technique of the Trajectory movement technique. The Dugu family's present achievements were the result of their continuous research on the Trajectory movement technique. The Dugu family's movement technique had already been stamped with the Dugu family's special imprint. Even if one learned the movement technique from the Trajectory Holy Temple, it was impossible for it to be identical to the Dugu family's movement technique. However, Zhao's movement technique clearly had the Dugu family's style. It wasn't a pure movement technique. "Your sword technique isn't as arrogant as yours." Xiao dodged a few strikes before finally counterattacking. As he dodged the broadsword, frost appeared on Zhao's broken bow. It swept towards Tianzhua like a popsicle. The ultimate family clan's frost battle aura? Tianzhua's broadsword collided with the bow as a cold aura immediately emanated from the broadsword. Half of the sword was covered in frost. Tianzhua parried the bow, but Xiao used the bow like a staff. His usage was extremely strange. Tianzhua's broadsword had no choice but to constantly clash with the bow. With every clash, the frost battle aura on the bow would be transmitted to the broadsword. The broadsword would then be transmitted to Entienne's hand. Entienne's sword-wielding arm was already covered in frost, and it was still spreading to his body. "Are you still sure that I'm from the Trajectory Holy Temple?" Xiao said as he attacked. "Yes," Entienne's answered very calmly, but his tone was very certain. He brandished his broadsword and forced Xiao to retreat. The frost on his body instantly shattered and splattered everywhere. Ice shards fell to the ground, but Entienne's body wasn't affected by the frost. "You actually managed to avoid the frost battle aura's freezing power. You shouldn't have revealed it so early. If you had waited a little longer and suddenly attacked when I got close, you should have been able to cause me some trouble," Xiao said as he retreated. "There's no need." Entienne's struck again and again. His sword techniques were domineering and upright. An ordinary person's sword techniques would have some evil aura when they were domineering. It was just like how Zhou Wen's transcendent flying immortal was domineering, but Entienne's domineering was completely different. Even being domineering gave people a sense of righteousness. It was really odd. Zhao's movement techniques changed, and his moves were ever-changing. It was as though he could freely use the famous skills of the 6 families, as though he had been practicing them since he was young. Even Entienne's was alarmed and puzzled. He knew that this wasn't an imitation ability, but a result of real hard work. He could sense that the feeling was different. Who is this fellow? Entienne's was momentarily unable to gain the upper hand. And Xing hadn't reached the terrorgrade. Although his talent was special and he could vaguely see some shadows, it was only a blurry shadow. It wasn't much different from not being able to see them. He could only roughly know where they were fighting. Gritting his teeth, Xing avoided the area where they were fighting and rushed towards the altar, hoping to save Ouyang Lan and company first. Bam! Xing wanted to rush up the altar. There was clearly nothing stopping him, but when he rushed over, he seemed to slam into a wall and was bounced back. His face was bruised and swollen as 2 streams of blood flowed out of his nostrils. Xing summoned his companion beast and transformed it into a dagger that stabbed into the air. With a clang, his hand that held the dagger turned numb, but the dagger failed to break through. Xing tried all sorts of methods to break through the invisible barrier, but none of them were effective. On the other side, Entienne's and Xiao Bufeng's battle was evenly matched. Neither of them had the absolute upper hand. Entienne's figure suddenly stopped moving as he pointed the broadsword in his hand at Xiao. Instantly, the entire world seemed to vanish. It was as though only the broadsword was left in the world. Xiao wore a mask, and it was unknown what expression he had. His figure also stopped as he stared intently at Entienne's. The purple armor on his body emitted a golden glow as the light of fear above his head condensed into the shape of a crown. Holy Emperor body? Entienne's recognized it and couldn't help but frown slightly. The Holy Emperor body originated from the Divine Sovereign Temple and had always been passed down by the Cape family. Your power of fear is similar to the power of law. It can destroy all evil, but the power of the imperial power should be your nemesis, right? Xiao was like a supreme god emperor as he looked down on Entienne's. Chapter 1201. The great sword that had occupied the world seemed to instantly turn insignificant. Instead, when Zhao's hand slammed down, the great sword's sword beam immediately collapsed and rapidly collapsed. The great sword in Entienne's hand buzzed as though it would snap at any moment. Under the immense pressure, Entienne's took a step back with every step Xiao took. The great sword's blade began to bend under the pressure. In front of imperial power, the law is just a toy. If your sword of law can't defeat imperial power, you can't defeat me either. Xiao kept pressuring Entienne's while using his words to disrupt Entienne's will. Entienne's didn't say a word, but his feet seemed to be nailed into the rock. He no longer retreated. The great sword in his hand forcefully resisted Zhao's imperial power, but it was forced to bend more and more. The sturdy greatsword seemed to have turned into bamboo, almost bending at a 90-degree angle. And Tianzua, you lost because you were too confident and arrogant. If you had both hands, I might not have been able to win so easily. Unfortunately, you are too weak with only one hand. As Xiao spoke, the sacred imperial power in his body completely erupted. He punched out, and the golden light snapped the greatsword, drowning in Tianzua in a brilliant golden light. However, at that moment, Zhao's expression suddenly changed drastically. He circulated his orbit movement technique to quickly retreat, but it was too late. Boom! The brilliant golden imperial power shattered as Tianzua charged out with the broken sword in hand. In an instant, he appeared in front of Xiao and stabbed at his heart. Zhao's orbit movement technique changed strangely. Just as he thought he could escape the broken sword's attack, the broken sword in Tianzua's hand suddenly flew out and pierced through his heart. The force in the greatsword didn't stop. It slammed Zhao's body into the stone pillar behind him, pinning him to it. Xiao extended his hand in an attempt to pull out the broken sword, but when his fingers touched it, he felt as though he had been electrocuted. The power in the broken sword repelled him, and at the same time, the broken sword was nailed even deeper. So what if you have imperial power? In my eyes, there is only right and wrong. There is nothing else. Ignoring the fact that there are no longer any emperors in this era, even if there were, they would still have to be punished by the law. After saying that, Tianzua wanted to charge towards the altar to save Ouyang Lan and the others. Xiao, who was pinned to the stone pillar, suddenly started laughing maniacally. He grabbed the broken sword in front of his chest with both hands and allowed the power of law on the broken sword to cut into his flesh. However, he remained unmoved. The armor and flesh on his body were lacerated by the power of law, but the broken sword was still forcibly pulled out of his chest. Clang! Xiao threw the broken sword on the ground. His almost completely shattered heart and the wounds on his body were healing at an incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, he had completely recovered. Invincible connate divine art? Tianzua frowned as he looked at Xiao. He recognized the power. Xiao Ji stopped laughing and hovered in the air, saying in a cold voice, "Your so-called law is nothing but the product of the strong. You are strong enough, so you can make laws and break the imperial power. If you are not strong enough, then talking about the punishment of the law is just a joke. If you, Tianzua, say that there is law, then there can be law. That is because you are strong enough, but what difference is there between that and imperial power? It is just a change of name. Tianzua, your sword of law is still the sword of power. Why do you need to lie to yourself?" At their level, the battle was no longer a battle of pure skills. It was also a battle of belief. If a person knew that they were in the wrong, then they would be very strong and fight with all their might without any distracting thoughts. Even if they lost control of their state of mind for a moment, it could become a fatal flaw. On the other hand, if one occupied the word reason, then their beliefs would be unbreakable. Originally, they only had 10% of their strength, but they could even erupt with 120% of their strength. Tianzua was not moved at all. He stretched out his hand and the broken sword automatically flew back into his palm. Tianzua held the broken sword and said, "It doesn't matter. I have never thought that everyone is equal. My law is only law and only law." As he spoke, Tianzua walked towards Xiao step by step. The broken sword in his hand produced streams of power of law. They were like chains that constantly condensed on the broken sword, mending the damaged sword body and causing the power of the broken sword to become stronger. Xiao held the broken bow, and the power of fear on his body was strange and unfathomable. He used many kinds of powers, and it was very difficult to distinguish which power he was using. The instant Tianzua raised the sword, Xiao also took a step forward. When he took this step, the entire world seemed to follow his body and press down on Tianzua. This was not the Dugu clan's trajectory movement technique, but the Xia clan's path to seizing heaven. No matter how Zhao's movement technique and power changed, the broken sword in Tianzua's hand remained the same. There were not too many fancy moves, nor were there any magical abilities. However, all the powers were broken by Tianzua's sword force. No matter how Xiao changed, he was unable to gain the upper hand. "Xiao, there's no time for you to continue playing." A voice came from within the altar, and a figure walked out from behind the stone pillar with the flag on it. The person's attire was very different from Zhao's. He was also wearing armor and a mask, but he was taller and more muscular. He was nearly 3 meters tall and no longer looked like a normal human. And Tianzua and Enshing's hearts tightened. What they were most worried about had happened. The other party had spent so much effort to lure them here, so it didn't make sense for Xiao to be the only one here. In fact, that was indeed the case. The man walked out from behind the stone pillar, and slowly walked to the stone pillar where Ouyang Lan was. He glanced at the nearly unconscious Ouyang Lan who was chained to the stone pillar. "You don't have to care about my matters," Xiao said. "I don't want to care either, but they have to die." As the man spoke, he raised his fist. His fist emitted a light that resembled the sun as he blasted it at Ouyang Lan with extremely scorching power. "Stop!" And Xing desperately slammed into the altar. He lacked strength and was unable to break through the altar's barrier. When his body slammed into the barrier, he fractured his bones as blood seeped out of his mouth and nose. Knowing that it was impossible for him to charge in, and Xing gritted his teeth as his eyes emitted a demonic glow. It was as though numbers were swirling in his pupils. Inside the altar, the man's arms seemed to be bound by an invisible rope. He paused slightly and turned to look at Enshing outside. He saw Enshing bleeding from his 7 orifices as the strange glow in his eyes intensified. Annoying bug. The man turned his arm and threw a punch at Enshing. Boom. Enshing had no time to dodge as his body was inundated by the sun-like fist force. Even the ground was blasted open, leaving a huge crater. Chapter 1202. The armor on Enshing's body was in tatters, and the burns on his body were severe. His skin and flesh were almost charred. He fell into a huge pit, his body emitting smoke. It was unknown if he was dead or alive. The man turned around and was about to attack Ouyang Lan again, but he realized that the force had wrapped around his arm again. He turned his head and saw Enshing struggling to get up from the ground. His injuries were severe, so it was difficult for him to even stand up. However, the demonic glint in his eyes didn't weaken. What a disgusting bug. It's as disgusting as cockroaches. The man glanced at Enshing in disgust. The power of the sun on his fist grew stronger and stronger. Soon it was so strong that one couldn't look at it directly. Even outside the altar, one could feel the terrifying heat from his fist. Clearly, the man wanted to finish Enshing off in one go and had no interest in continuing this fight. This time, the power of the sun on his fist was more than 100 times stronger than before. It was a true Terragrade power, unlike a casual strike from before. A sinister glint flashed in the man's eyes. His fist didn't turn towards Enshing but continued to aim at Ouyang Lan. If Enshing gave up now, his fist would strike at Ouyang Lan. If Enshing didn't give up, he wouldn't even have a chance to escape. He would be killed immediately. Enshing could already tell what the man was planning, but he had no other choice. He stood in the pit with great difficulty as the numbers in his eyes constantly circulated, transforming into a strange force that wrapped around the man's arm, preventing him from striking Ouyang Lan. Enshing knew very well that his strength wasn't enough to restrain the man. The reason why the man didn't directly attack Ouyang Lan was because he had deliberately put him in a dilemma to see him suffer mentally. Enshing wasn't angry. Instead, he felt lucky. This was because his strength wasn't enough to truly stop the man, nor could he rush into the altar. The man's actions allowed him to stall for more time. Your time is up. Seeing that Enxing was unmoved, the man lost interest in continuing playing. The terrifying sun-like fist force blasted at Enxing. The entire world seemed to be drowned by the blazing white fist force. Even the air seemed to melt. Ah Xing, let's go. And Tianzhua wanted to rush over a few times, but he was held back by Xiao. He failed to rush over as he roared at Enxing. Overseer, I hope I can be your adjutant in my next life. Enxing calmly faced the sun-like punch. He no longer had a chance to leave, nor did he have any intention of leaving. The terrifying light and heat melted everything. Just as Enxing's figure was about to be drowned, a cool breeze blew over. When the terrifying flames encountered the cool breeze, not only were they unable to take advantage of the wind, they were extinguished in an instant. In just an instant, the sun-like fist force was extinguished without a sound. Wherever the cool breeze blew, frost formed on the ground. A girl as graceful as a fairy flew to Enxing's side while sitting on a banana leaf. Enxing was overjoyed when he saw the girl's appearance. He turned his head and saw Zhou walking over with Yer in his arms. Young Master One, you're finally here. Why are you so slow? Upon seeing Zhou, Tianzhua's expression eased as he stared intently at Xiao. It's already not bad that you came here alive. Zhou came in front of the altar and looked at the man on it. You are Zhou, right? You came just in time. You saved me the trouble of making another trip. The man sized up Zhou and Banana Fairy as he asked coldly. Who are you? Zhou asked the man. Saint Lai. The man answered proudly. Young Master One, they are from the Holy Temple. The disappearance of the expedition team is related to them, Enxing said. Got it. Leave it to me. Zhou summoned some pill essences and threw them at Enxing before walking towards the altar. You sure are confident. Just because of that Terragrade Extreme Een companion beast? Her strength is indeed a counter to mine. Perhaps she can stop me for a moment, but unfortunately, you can't even enter the altar. You don't even have the right to stop me, Lai said coldly as he threw a punch at Ouyang Lan and company. Lai said coldly and punched towards Ouyang Lan and the others. He did not want to have too much trouble and wanted to kill Ouyang Lan and the others first. However, before Lai's fist could land, he suddenly heard a boom. The barrier outside the altar instantly shattered as a sword beam tore through the air. In his shock, Lai threw a punch at the sword beam, but his sun fist couldn't block the sword beam. His fist bones were instantly pierced through. If he hadn't dodged to the side, his body would have been pierced as well. The sword beam pierced through Lai's fist bones and circled around before flying back to Zhou side, transforming into a sword that floated beside him. Zhou had already arrived beside Ouyang Lan. He held the sword formed by sword pill and slashed 3 times consecutively, severing all the chains that bound Ouyang Lan. He reached out to grab Ouyang Lan and summoned the pill essences to feed them to her. Yer and the chick stayed by Enxing's side. When Enxing saw that Ouyang Lan had been saved, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Lai looked at the sword pill in Zhou hand and lost his previous arrogance. Xiao, didn't you say that only in Tianzhua and Ling Zongjing are afraid of Luoyang? What's wrong with this fellow? The sun divine light on Lai's body constantly condensed. His entire body emitted light and heat like the sun as he spoke loudly. How would I know? I know as much as you do, Xiao said indifferently. However, this is good too. It's more interesting. Don't tell me you can't even deal with an adopted son of the infamily? Lai wasn't in the mood to waste his breath with Xiao. The sun divine light on his body grew stronger. You possess the power of the sun. Are you from the Sun God Temple? Zhou sized up Lai and asked. Don't compare me to you worms. I'm a saint of the Sun God Temple, Lai said coldly. So you aren't human? Zhou sized up Lai in surprise. As the guardian aura on Lai was too intense, He couldn't be sure if there was anyone inside the armor. However, he felt that Lai wasn't a pure guardian. Of course not. Lai constantly accumulated his strength, his entire body like a nuclear bomb that could explode at any moment. Were you the ones who captured Professor Ouyang and the expedition team? Zhou continued asking. Go to hell and ask them. As Lai spoke, the accumulated power on his body instantly erupted. The terrifying power of the sun was like a star exploding, producing terrifying light and fire. Zhou didn't move. Beside him, Banana Fairy opened her mouth and spat out another mouthful of Grand Yin wind. The power of the sun that Lai had accumulated for a long time was extinguished by the Grand Yin wind. The flames on Lai's body were extinguished as he was swept up by the Grand Yin wind and slammed into a stone pillar before stopping. When he fell to the ground, his body was already covered in frost like an ice sculpture. Lai struggled to stand up, his eyes filled with horror. He knew that Banana Fairy was an extreme Yin elemental companion beast, but he never expected her to be so Yin. She was his nemesis. The power of the sun was completely suppressed and useless. End of this chapter. Chapter 1203. Zhou teleported to Lai's side, planning on capturing him alive. After investigating for so long, he finally had an idea. He naturally had to get to the bottom of it. Go to hell with me. However, before Zhou could touch Lai's body suddenly swelled up like a drum. Light and fire seemed to be spewing out from within. He had chosen to self-destruct without any hesitation. Damn it! Zhou could teleport away, but there were other people chained up in the altar. If he allowed Lai to self-destruct here, the others would definitely die. Instantly, Zhou made up his mind. Almost at the same time Lai's body exploded, he reached out and pressed down on him, teleporting him away. Boom! In the distance, there was a terrifying explosion in the group of Shuras. The explosion was like a hydrogen bomb, destroying countless Shuras in an instant. When Xiao saw this scene, his figure flashed as he drew a strange trajectory, charging towards the exit of Azura path. And Tianzhua chased after Xiao and held him back. Under Tianzhua's sword attack, Xiao couldn't escape for a moment. After Ouyang Lan ate the pill essence, she had already woken up. Zhou placed her beside Xing and brandished his sword to save the other chained people. Only then did he rush over, planning on helping Tianzhua take down Xiao. He could only get to the bottom of the matter regarding the former principal from these people. He really wanted to know if the former principal was still alive. Zhou joined the battle with sword pill in hand. His sword techniques weren't inferior to Tianzhua's, but their styles were different. Although they had never worked together before, it didn't affect each other's performance at all. They had a tacit understanding. Facing the combined attacks of the two, Xiao was immediately at a disadvantage. He was in imminent danger. Xiao was a ruthless person. He endured Tianzhua's full-powered strike and charged out of the encirclement. However, to everyone's surprise, he didn't charge towards the exit of Azura path. Instead, he charged towards Xing and Ouyang Lan. Zhou and Tianzhua rushed over to stop him. Zhao's figure suddenly changed as he landed on an altar beside them. The two immediately knew that something was amiss. Zhao's goal was the altar. He was charging at Xing and company to divert their attention. Under such circumstances, this person's train of thought is still so clear. He also has such execution ability. He's truly a figure. Zhou teleported over as sword pill continued slashing at Xiao on the altar. Xiao had suffered an attack from Tianzhua, but he recovered extremely quickly. Zhou also recognized it as the Xia family's invincible connate divine art. He knew that ordinary injuries were useless against him. In this strike, Zhou had also hidden the power of Brahma. Su didn't dodge. Instead, he stuck out his chest and faced the sword pellet. The extremely sharp sword pellet pierced through his body, and fresh blood immediately flowed out from the sword pellet, dripping onto the sacrificial altar. Zhou Wen's expression changed slightly as he guessed the reason for Zhao's actions. However, he had no other choice. He brandished sword pill, hoping to slice Zhao's body into two. Zhao's body strangely retreated as a foot-long wound appeared on his chest. However, he wasn't cleaved into two. A large amount of blood from Xiao Shen's body fell onto the altar. When the altar came into contact with the blood, it began to spin like a roulette. As the altar rotated, the position of the stone pillar also began to move. Zhou Wen knew that something bad would definitely happen, so he only wanted to quickly take down Xiao. The sword pill in his hand moved faster and faster. However, Zhao's movement technique wasn't weak either. His trajectory movement technique wasn't inferior to Zhou Wen's transcendent flying immortal. His speed wasn't inferior to Zhou Wen's, and he was even faster. After all, Zhou Wen was still at the mythical stage. His stats hadn't reached the level of the terror grade, so he was at a disadvantage in this aspect. As the altar rotated, a strange thing happened. The Asura, who was originally unafraid of death, retreated like a tidal wave as they quickly distanced themselves from the altar. When all the stone pillars formed a circle, a hole cracked open in the middle of the altar. Boundless demonic aura spewed out like a volcano eruption. Ashura rushed out with demonic aura. He looked similar to ordinary Shuras. He wore a mask, a bare upper body, and a feather skirt. There was a strange bird tattoo on his back, and he held a Shura blade in his hand. The difference was that this Shura's hair, mask, feather skirt, strange bird tattoo, and Shura blade were all purple. Typical Shuras were black. A terror grade Asura? Just as Zhou Wen was thinking, the Asura had already slashed at him. It was unknown what Xiao had done, but Asura, who was also on the altar, ignored him and slashed at Zhou Wen. This strike was filled with demonic aura. Be it its strength or abilities, it was completely different from the heavenly Asura. Zhou Wen brandished his sword to block as the sword pill collided with the Shura saber. A strange thing happened. The Shura saber was like an illusion as the sword pill passed through it while the Shura saber continued slashing at Zhou Wen. Without any hesitation, Zhou Wen teleported away from the altar. He didn't test the saber with his body. When Zhou Wen appeared under the altar, the Asura chased after him and slashed at Zhou Wen's neck like a ghost. "Let's meet again if fate wills it," Xiao chuckled. Xiao said with a chuckle. His figure flew up and drew a strange trajectory in the air, heading in the direction of the exit of the Asura path. And Tianzhua immediately chased after him, hoping to stop Xiao. Zhou Wen didn't dare chase after him. He might be able to shake off the Asura if he used teleportation, but if he and Tianzhua left, Sheng and company would be in danger if the Asura changed targets after being shaken off. Zhou Wen could only hope that Tianzhua could capture Xiao while he fought the Asura. This Asura was very strange. Zhou Wen used teleportation to dodge his attacks. Sword pill stabbed him several times, but it was as though he had stabbed an illusion. There was no point of impact. Could this be an illusion? Zhou Wen was puzzled. When the Asura slashed at him again, he deliberately summoned a poison bat to block the Shura blade. In the end, the poison bat was sliced into two by the Shura blade. It was dead. Zhou Wen secretly rejoiced that he hadn't used his body to test it. At the same time, he felt a headache. His attacks were useless against the Asura, which meant that the Asura was invincible. From the looks of it, it should be a power similar to a spirit body. I can only try Great Brahma. Zhou Wen summoned Great Brahma. The four-faced, eight-armed Great Brahma with a black hole spinning on its back stood in front of the Asura. The Asura didn't know what fear was as he slashed over. Great Brahma automatically counterattacked and struck out at the Asura's saber. With a clang, the Asura's saber was blocked. Zhou Wen heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Great Brahma could block the Asura. However, other than the side on his back, Great Brahma couldn't take the initiative to attack. The Asura slashed down with his saber and the great Brahma blocked with his palm. Although he managed to block the Asura, he failed to kill him. Chapter 1204. The Asura was blocked by Brahma as Zhou looked at the altar. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the entrance in the middle of the altar had been sealed and the stone pillar had returned to its original spot. No other dimensional creatures rushed out. "Sislan, are you all right?" Zhou came to Ouyanglan's side and asked. "I'm fine." After Ouyanglan ate some pills, she felt much better. She said to Zhou, "Little one, my father might not be dead. You found the former principal's whereabouts?" Zhouwen's eyes lit up as he asked excitedly. "We met the zombie Chu He in Netherworld City previously. We used some special abilities to extract some memories from him. Although the memories are very incomplete, we still gained something," Ouyanglan said. "What did you discover?" Zhou hurriedly asked. Ouyanglan pointed at the flag on the stone pillar. This. Before Chu He was replaced, he had seen this symbol on the fake expedition members more than once. Zhou didn't know if this had anything to do with the former principal being alive or not. It could only mean that they came from such an organization. Ouyanglan continued, "Now we already know that this symbol is related to the Holy Temple. And after those two fellows captured us, they kept asking about my father. It's very likely that they are looking for something. If my father has what they need and they haven't found it, if it were you, would you kill my father?" "No." Zhou finally understood why Ouyanglan said that the former principal might still be alive. In other words, the former principal might be in the Holy Temple? Zhou was somewhat excited. After investigating for so long, he finally knew where the former principal might be. Although it's only a possibility, it's better than blindly searching in the past. Unfortunately, entering the Holy Land isn't an easy task, Ouyanglan said with a sigh. The Holy Land had a restriction on the level of those who entered. High-level humans couldn't enter, and it was useless for low-level humans to enter. They would only end up being toyed with. Zhou had entered the Holy Land before, so he naturally knew about the 6 holy temples. They looked like they were the guardians of humans, but in fact they were extremely strange places. If low-level people were to enter to investigate this matter, it was basically no different from courting death. "Sislan, this isn't a place to talk. Rest for a while. We'll return after I finish off that Asura." Zhou got in Xing to take care of Ouyanglan and company as he walked towards Asura again. Zhou wanted to chase after Xiao, but with Tianzhua already chasing after him, he couldn't do so. Otherwise, if Xiao Sha returned and captured Ouyanglan as a hostage, it would be even more troublesome. Zhao's trajectory was too strange. Even Zhou was 100% confident that he could stop him. Of the few Terragrade existences he had, only Banana Fairy and Demonic Neonate could compare to Xiao in terms of speed. Jade Rabbit and Ice Maiden weren't speed-tight. It was impossible for them to stop Xiao even if they were released. In the battle between Zhou and Asura, Banana Fairy had to guard Ouyanglan and company to prevent Xiao from sneaking up on them. Zhou was good at movement techniques to begin with, so he knew how terrifying an enemy like Xiao Sha was. Zhou didn't have any qualms about killing a strength-type enemy like Lai. However, it wasn't that easy to kill Xiao Sha. He was very similar to Zhou in every aspect. He was the type of person that was the hardest to kill. Asura's power was very strange. Among the few Terra transformation powers that Zhou had, only Brahma could deal with him. However, after Zhou observed for a while, he had other thoughts. If Brahma used the final side, it wouldn't be difficult to kill Asura. However, the power of that side was about the same as Torch Dragon's Bright Torch Vision World. Once it was used, even if he could kill the enemy, he wouldn't obtain anything. Since it was too late to chase after him, Zhou could only choose to trust in Tianzhua. He stayed behind to kill Asura and see if he could obtain anything good. This Asura's power should be of the fiendish Tao. However, There's a hint of death in the fiendish Tao. Zhou couldn't tell what kind of power it was. I'll give it a try. I wonder if the power of the ancient Sovereign Sutra can restrain Asura's power. Zhou engraved the ancient Sovereign Sutra on his wheel of destiny. The mythical ancient Sovereign Sutra naturally couldn't be of much use against Terragrade creatures. Therefore, Zhou wanted to attempt to let the ancient Sovereign Sutra break through to the Terragrade. Only then could it be effective against Asura. As the ancient Sovereign Sutra was engraved on the Wheel of Destiny, a figure that resembled an ancient sovereign appeared. And Tianzuo's speed wasn't slow. At the very least, it wasn't slower than Xiao Sha's. However, Tianzuo had a serious problem. His straight-line speed was very fast, but he was inferior when it came to changes. Once he changed directions, his speed would drop drastically. As for Xiao Sha, it was the exact opposite. No matter how he changed his movement technique, it didn't affect his speed, preventing Tianzuo from catching up to him. However, Xiao wasn't able to shake Tianzuo off either. Tianzuo had grasped the general direction in which he wanted to leave Asura path, making it difficult for Xiao to shake him off. In the end, Tianzuo was still one step ahead of Xiao. He occupied the exit of Asura path and stood there with his sword, staring coldly at Xiao. Xiao naturally understood that he had to rush out before Zhou arrived. He couldn't be entangled with Tianzuo here. Therefore, not only did he not slow down, but he also charged forward even faster. Xiao, who had the speed of a Terragrade and was good at movement techniques, had long broken through the limits of human vision. Tianzuo remained motionless like an extremely precise instrument. There weren't any fluctuations when he wasn't moving, but once he was moved, it would trigger a series of chain reactions. In Zhao's eyes, although Tianzuo was just standing there, his entire aura was like an invisible net. The net seemed to be woven by a goddess without any flaws. The law is merciless, but so what? I'll use my emotions to break the law. Zhao's eyes shimmered with a strange glint as he held the broken bowstring in his hand. He followed a mysterious trajectory and instantly appeared in front of Tianzuo. Tianzuo slashed down with the broken sword in his hand, as though an invisible net had descended. Countless crisscrossing sword beams sealed off all of Zhao's paths of retreat. Crack! Crack! Under the merciless law sword net, the bow in Zhao's hand and the armor on his body were sliced apart inch by inch. Blood spewed out from his wounds, but Xiao didn't stop. He slammed into Tianzuo like a bloody man. He had the aura of sacrificing himself to perish together with Tianzuo. His eyes kept staring at Tianzuo as though he was provoking him. Don't dodge if you have the guts. Chapter 1205. The broken sword in Tianzuo's left hand had already slashed out with all his might, nearly scraping Xiao alive. However, he ultimately failed to kill him. If Tianzuo had both hands, he could have smacked the bloody Xiao into mush with one palm. Unfortunately, Tianzuo only had one hand left. Even so, Tianzuo had no intention of retreating. He stood there like a mountain and stared into Zhao's blood-stained eyes. He had no intention of retreating. The blood that spewed out from Zhao's body seemed to have a life of its own as it charged at Tianzuo with Xiao. The bloody Xiao was like a blood-colored devil. Its ferocity left one shuddering. Tianzuo didn't retreat. At the instant Xiao slammed into him, Tianzuo used his head to slam into Zhao's head. Bam! The two unreserved powers of fear collided, causing Zhao's head to explode. After his bloody body slammed into Tianzuo's body, he was sent retreating. Blood splattered everywhere as he was no longer able to attach himself to Zhao's remnant body. The mechanical armor on Tianzuo's head shattered as his forehead kept bleeding. However, he still managed to defend Asura Path's door without taking a step back. Seeing Zhao's corpse collapse, Tianzuo's expression suddenly changed. He immediately turned to look at Azura Path's exit and saw a drop of blood spew out from Zhao's body as it landed on the door. And Tianzua drew his sword and slashed, but he was still a step too late. The drop of blood landed on the door like a stone thrown into a lake. It caused spatial ripples before vanishing. Li Xian, Lu Bushun, and Jingyu and company waited outside the Bridge of Helplessness. Why haven't Overseer and the rest come out after so long? Lu Bushun's fat body paced around, unable to rest for a moment. Can you stop wandering around there? It's making me dizzy, Li Xian said. What has your dizziness got to do with me? That's because your kidneys are weak, Lu Bushun retorted. Dodge. Just as Li Xian was about to say something, he suddenly heard a shout. Lu Bushun and company immediately recognized Tianzua's voice. All of them stood up warily and looked in the direction of the Bridge of Helplessness. However, they did not see anything. There was nothing on the other side of the Bridge of Helplessness. Li Xian saw Tianzua rush out of the Bridge of Helplessness. At the same time, he saw a drop of blood shoot towards Lu Bushun, who was closest to the Bridge of Helplessness, at an unbelievable speed. Li Xian didn't have the time to completely transform into his terror form. He only had time to transform his palm into a terror form and block Lu Bushun's forehead. Bang! The drop of blood was like a bullet as it pierced through Li Xian's terror-transformed palm. Thankfully, with Li Xian blocking it and buying some time, Lu Bushun's reaction was fast enough. With a roll, the drop of blood brushed past his hair. While the drop of blood was in the air, it actually transformed into Shaw. One in each hand, he sucked the two officers into his palms and grabbed their heads. As long as he exerted a bit of force, their heads would be crushed. And Tianzua, if you take another step, I'll crush their heads, Xiao said calmly. And Tianzua stopped. He knew that Xiao Luo was not joking. A person like him would definitely do what he said. Overseer, don't worry about us. The two officers struggled with all their might, but they were like chicks. No matter how much they struggled, they couldn't escape Butcher's grasp. Tianzua, what do you say? Xiao narrowed his eyes at Tianzua. Let them go and you can leave, Tianzua said. Without a word, Xiao let go, but he didn't leave immediately. A group of officers surrounded Xiao, but Tianzua only said indifferently, let him go. Tianzua is indeed Tianzua. I hope I'll have a chance to truly decide the victor with you next time. As Xiao spoke, he extended his hand and grabbed at the air. A wisp of black gas rushed out from the heads of the two officers he had grabbed and disappeared into Zhao's palm. See you again, Xiao said to Tianzua. Xiao said to Tianzua. When he turned around, he glanced at Li Xian before flying off and disappearing in the blink of an eye. Overseer, who was that? Lu Bushun was alarmed. Enemy. The next time you encounter him, try your best to avoid him. Tianzua looked in the direction Xiao had left in as though in thought. Tianzua didn't chase after him. He knew that he couldn't catch up to him even if he wanted to. Li Xian, do you know that person? Tianzua finally cast his gaze on Li Xian. He had a mask on his face, so I couldn't see his face. However, if I knew such a powerful fellow, I should have an impression of him. I don't have any impression of him at all, Li Xian said. That's strange, Tianzua said after some thought. What's strange? Li Xian knew that Tianzua's words had something to do with him, so he asked. Tianzua looked at Li Xian and Yer and said, these people know our family very well. They should know that our family dotes on Yer. In that situation, his best choice of hostages should have been Yer and you, but he didn't do that. Instead, he went far away and kidnapped two officers that he might not even know. This clearly doesn't make sense. Everyone found it reasonable when they heard that. In that situation, anyone else would have made Yer their first target. Li Xian also felt that Tianzua's words made sense, so he said after some thought, perhaps he knows how powerful I am and sees Yer being protected by me, so he doesn't dare attack her? His target is very clear. From the beginning, it wasn't you, but Lu Bushun. After that, you used the power of fear. Your advancement to the Terror grade happened in Netherworld City. It's impossible for them to know about it before, much less choose to avoid you from the beginning. It still doesn't make sense, and Tianzhua said with a shake of his head. Then I don't know. I really don't know this person, Li Xian said as he spread out his hands. Okay. And Tianzhua nodded and didn't say anything else. He frowned in thought. Overseer, where are young Master 1 and Adjutant N? Do we need to receive them? Lu Bushun asked. There's no need. Just wait here for them to return. And Tianzhua didn't return to Azura Path. Firstly, he was afraid that Xiao would return. Secondly, he was confident in Zhou. In Azura Path, Zhou-Wen's body emitted light like a sun god. He had already fused with the primordial human sovereign and was constantly transforming. With a thought, Zhou-Wen landed on Brahma's head. When the Azura attacked again, his fist emitted the glow of life as he struck the Azura. Azura's attack was completely blocked by Brahma. Zhou-Wen took the opportunity to strike, leaving him no room to dodge. Zhou-Wen's punch struck his chest. The Azura's body, which was like a spirit body that couldn't be injured by any force, melted like ice encountering fire when Zhou-Wen's punch struck it. A fist-sized hole melted in Azura's chest. I'll just write 2 chapters today. I'll sleep early and adjust my schedule. Starting tomorrow, I'll update at 6 in the evening. Many friends have asked questions about the book group. It hasn't been established yet. When it's established in the future, I'll inform everyone in the book. End of this chapter. Chapter 1206. There's a chance. Zhou-Wen was delighted. Unfortunately, the dent created by the ancient sovereign sutra's power quickly recovered. This left Zhou-Wen somewhat vexed. The power of primordial human sovereign gave Zhou-Wen the power to heal. No matter how badly he beat his opponent or how serious the damage was, he would eventually recover. Due to this characteristic, it could be said that using the power of primordial human sovereign to hit someone was actually saving someone. Zhou-Wen originally imagined that the Azura's body had traces of the power of death, so the power of primordial human sovereign might possess true lethality. From the looks of it, Zhou-Wen had been overthinking things. Could it be that the power of the ancient sovereign sutra really can't possess lethality? Zhou-Wen had thought of this problem when he was trapped in the past, but he couldn't come up with an answer. In fact, the ancient sovereign sutra wasn't necessarily without lethality. However, Zhou-Wen's own insights and advancement direction had caused the ancient sovereign sutra to lean towards this system. Finally, he condensed a strange life soul like primordial human sovereign. While Zhou-Wen was still pondering over it, the Azura pounced forward again. Unfortunately, it was blocked by Great Brahma. Zhou-Wen stood on Great Brahma's head. No matter how the Azura attacked, Great Brahma could withstand his attacks. Even if Zhou-Wen stood there in a daze, he wasn't injured at all. As Zhou-Wen pondered, he would throw a punch at the Azura from time to time. The power of the ancient sovereign sutra grew stronger and stronger, making Zhou-Wen's entire body seem like it was about to turn into light. However, the power of the ancient sovereign sutra remained the same. It didn't possess any true lethality. The wounds he inflicted would recover after a while. Furthermore, the power of the mythical ancient sovereign sutra couldn't really harm the Azura. Zhou-Wen blindly pursued lethality, but he realized that it was the opposite of what he wanted. Not only did the power of the ancient sovereign sutra not transform into a terror form, but it also weakened. The marks left on the wheel of destiny became shallower and shallower. Zhou-Wen came to a realization and knew that he had been too stubborn. There were some things that couldn't be forced. After giving up on forcefully changing the characteristics of the ancient sovereign sutra, Zhou-Wen began deducing the ancient sovereign sutra again. He engraved all his thoughts and insights onto the wheel of destiny. An emperor born of blood and fire would lead humanity to defy the heavens to seek survival and seek the true meaning of life. This was Zhou Wen's understanding of the ancient sovereign sutra in the past, but after being trapped for 100 years, Zhou Wen had a deeper understanding of life. Even if Zhou Wen didn't deliberately think about this problem, he couldn't help but think of it while imprisoned. After all, what is life? In the past, Zhou Wen felt that as long as he was alive, he would live. However, after 100 years of imprisonment, Zhou Wen realized that life wasn't as simple as living. To live happily was to live, and to be filled with sorrow was also to live. To travel the world and see the scenery of the world was to live, and to lie in bed like a vegetable was also to live. There were many possibilities to live. 10,000 people had 10,000 ways to live, but which way was the most meaningful? Different people might have different answers. When people were extremely bored, they would always think of such questions. Back then, Zhou Wen would occasionally have such thoughts and seriously consider this question, but he didn't obtain the final answer. From Zhou Wen's point of view, there was no way to say which way of living was better. Some people were happy just lying there in the sun, eating peanuts and drinking a bottle of beer. Some people put in all their efforts. Only by obtaining higher achievements and status could they feel happiness. In fact, there was no right or wrong. As long as it made one feel happy, it was an ideal life. Such an understanding didn't advance the ancient sovereign sutra to the terror grade. Therefore, Zhou Wen knew that he hadn't grasped the crux of it. What kind of life does the ancient sovereign sutra pursue? Is it eternal life? Zhou Wen pondered, but he felt that this wasn't the answer. Qi refinement warriors pursued eternal life, but the ancient sovereign wasn't. From the beginning, the ancient sovereign only wanted to survive. If the conditions for survival have been met, what should I do next? Zhou Wen planned on thinking from a different angle, and Sheng and company watched Zhou Wen and Asura fight. Although they couldn't see the terraform Asura and Brahma, they could see the terrifying shockwaves produced by the battle between Brahma and Asura. From their point of view, Zhou Wen floated in the air and spent most of his time thinking. Only occasionally would he throw a punch, but even if he just stood there motionless, the terror-grade Asura couldn't injure him at all. The terrifying shockwave shattered everything nearby. Madam, young Master Wen's strength is probably not inferior to the overseer's, an officer who had been rescued said to Ouyang Lan. My son naturally won't be bad, Ouyang Lan said matter-of-factly. And Xing nodded and said, young Master Wen's talent is excellent. His future achievements won't be limited to this. In the future, with the Overseer and young Master Wen presiding over Luoyang, it will definitely be as stable as Mount Tai. The other officers felt something amiss when they heard that. As the saying went, a mountain couldn't accommodate two tigers. In the past, they felt that any genius was only a younger brother in front of an Tianzhua. With a master and support, there was naturally no need to worry about the two tigers competing. However, the ability that Zhou Wen had displayed made them somewhat worried. If the Overseer can't suppress Zhou Wen, will Luoyang become a battle between tigers and dragons one day? The countless experiences and cruel reality of the ancients told them that such things were too common. They naturally couldn't help but worry. However, Ouyang Lan and Anxing didn't have such worries. This was because they knew that Zhou Wen's heart wasn't that small. At the very least, Luoyang couldn't accommodate his heart. At that moment, the glow on Zhou Wen's body didn't continue to intensify. Instead, it gradually dimmed. The primordial human sovereign was still fusing with him, but the sun-like glow was converging. It was as though Zhou Wen was falling from a god to a mortal. However, Zhou Wen's aura didn't weaken because of this. On the contrary, his aura became stronger and stronger. 1,000 people have 1,000 different ways of living. With my intelligence, I still can't tell which way of living is truly correct. However, there is one thing I can be sure of. The way I want to live is to do the things that people at different ages should do. When I was 5, I wanted an ordinary doll. That was my greatest joy, but I didn't get it back then. This was because the money my father left me was only enough for me to eat every day. If I used the money to buy a doll, I would have to starve for a week. Therefore, I chose to give up on dolls. Now, it's easy for me to buy 10,000 dolls, but that joy and the desire I had back then can never be found again. Joan closed his eyes as the past surfaced in his mind like a movie. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.